Chapter 6:21. The finals of the 8-city tournament had finally arrived. On this day, almost all the players had gathered in the live broadcast room to watch the competition live. This was a super event that happened once every 10 years. Who would dominate the game for the next 10 years would depend on this competition. At the very least, the virtual ranking of each sword wielder on the leaderboard would change drastically. The player who won the group would definitely be ranked first on the leaderboard. However, this was meaningless to Gohan, because he was already first in the treasured sword group. There was no way for him to advance further. First was the ancient sword group's competition. One used the Isien sword, which was ranked first in the ancient sword group, while the other used the Cloud Dragon sword, which was ranked fifth in the ancient sword group. The sword ladies on both sides were experts in swordsmanship, so the fight was very intense. Their swordsmanship was exquisite. In Gohan's eyes, most treasured sword wielder was probably not a match for these two ancient sword wielder. Each of them had astonishing strength. In the end, the one using the Isien sword was more skilled, or rather, the Isien sword, the number one sword wielder in the ancient sword group, lived up to its name. In the end, she used her ultimate move to summon 20 red barbarian cannons and bombarded her opponent. She successfully blasted her opponent into pieces and won. The two of them fought for a long time, but in the end, they still used the cannons to do the talking. After the ancient sword group's competition ended, it was Gohan's turn to fight against the Fantasy Village's good guy. When the two of them stood in the arena, the audience watching the live broadcast was very calm. "Sigh, there's nothing to see. What are you watching?" "That's right, I don't want to watch at all. There's no suspense at all. Isn't it still Military Governor who wins? Why don't we guess how long this Fantasy Village's good guy can last?" The forum was full of such discussions. It seemed that in everyone's hearts, the championship was already in the bag for Military Governor. "Military Governor, everyone says that you will definitely be the champion of the treasured sword group. I wonder if you think so too?" After the competition began, the good people of Fantasyland did not rush to attack. Instead, they asked Gohan this. According to common sense, at this time, Gohan should be extremely humble in denying it. Anyone would have to be a bit more courteous, saying something along the lines of, "You flatter me, your distinguished self-strength is astonishing, victory or defeat is yet to be determined." Unexpectedly, Gohan nodded very honestly. "Yes, that's what I've always thought. Who else but me can do it?" "Arrogant bastard." The face of the good man from Fantasy Village stiffened, as if he had suffered a deep insult from Gohan. This guy didn't even bother to be courteous with him. He didn't put him in his eyes at all. He must let him taste the taste of failure. He must snatch the first place from his hands. The deep light in the belly of the fish. "Come out, my fish intestines." Damn, who would have thought that this good man from Fantasy Village was also a veteran Chunibyo enthusiast? After secretly chanting a liberation prayer, he released his fish intestines sword. Gohan saw the fish intestines as an opponent. It was small and exquisite, with two sharp little canine teeth poking out slightly. It had a large fishtail braid on its back, and there were fin-like decorations on its arms. It looked like a living little yellow fish. Seeing that the opponent had released the fish intestines sword, Gohan took out his heavenly sword and prepared to have a battle between the first and second place. He didn't think that the good man from Fantasy Village would actually take out something from his pocket. This was a 2-meter square diagram. The good man from Fantasy Village threw this diagram into the sky, and it covered the good man's body, fusing into his body. What happened next was even more shocking. At this time, the good man from Fantasy Village actually took out his ancient sword-grade sword mistress. The light of hope in the night. "Come out, my Isien." Damn, the good man from Fantasy Village's ancient sword-grade sword mistress, the Isien sword, was also released and stood side by side with the fish intestines sword. F***ck. What happened? Why can this person's ancient sword-grade swordmistress and treasured sword-grade swordmistress be released at the same time? The audience watching the live broadcast was in an uproar. They all expressed that they didn't know what had happened. It's a sword diagram? Gohan was the smart one. He immediately saw through the trick. To be able to make two sword mistresses fight at the same time, so the yin-yang harmony sword diagram is in your hands. TSK, military governor has good eyes. You can tell that this is a sword diagram at a glance. That's right, this is the yin-yang harmony sword diagram, the treasure of my fantasy village's sword sect. It has disappeared for more than 30 years. I didn't think that it would appear again to be used to fight Sir Military Governor. The good man from Fantasy Village said proudly. Sword diagram. He didn't know if everyone still remembered this thing. There were two ways to use it. The second way was to place the sword diagram in one's purple palace and merge it with one's sword mark. This way, one could use multiple sword mistresses at the same time. The yin-yang harmony sword diagram was a sword diagram that could make two sword mistresses fight at the same time. That was why the good man from Fantasy Village could summon his ancient sword-grade and treasured sword-grade sword mistresses at the same time. Summoning two sword mistresses to fight at the same time was only a small part of its ability. More importantly, the yin-yang harmony sword diagram had its own special ability. As for what this special ability was, Gohan didn't have any information on it. This sword diagram had only been excitedly posted by the person who discovered it when it first appeared. After that, there were no more details about the sword diagram. He didn't expect it to fall into the hands of Fantasy Village's sword sect and be hidden for a whole 30 years. Xian, fish intestines. Have a good fight with this Mr. Military Governor. Fantasy Village's good guy said with a smile. Shortly after, Fishbowl's sword disappeared from the arena without a trace. This was the Fishbowl sword's killing path characteristic. Endless killing intent. As long as Fishbowl's sword still has a shred of fighting intent, she can turn invisible at will after breaking away from her opponent. Mr. Military Governor, take this. On the other side, Xian had also arrived in front of Gohan. The Xian sword was extremely flashy, and it constantly produced the sound of a sword humming in the air. The Xian sword used the Western sword technique, which was completely different from Eastern sword technique. A piece of cake. Although Xian's sword technique was indeed exquisite, it wasn't on the same level as Gohan's. Gohan's heavenly sword lightly pushed, and the Xian sword was pushed aside. The blade of the sword slashed straight at Xian's left arm, and it looked like it was about to give Xian a heavy blow. There's an opening. At that moment, the invisible fish intestines suddenly appeared. The fish intestines dagger in her hand was less than a centimeter away from Gohan's waist. Within 0.1 seconds, she would deliver a heavy blow to Gohan. Go to hell. In the eyes of the Fishbowl sword, Gohan seemed to be a dead man. But in the end, this sure kill strike suddenly missed. The Fishbowl sword actually missed. Gohan, who had just had his back to the Fishbowl sword, suddenly faced it with a calm expression. Only then did the fish intestines understand that the opponent had long since discovered her existence and prepared for it. Retreat. As an assassin, she should retreat immediately if her attack missed, so the fish intestines immediately prepared to enter stealth again. Unfortunately, how could Gohan let the fish intestines leave so easily? Just as the Fishbowl sword was about to disappear, the heavenly sword suddenly slashed down towards the space to the left of Gohan. A little lowly, whose face was filled with terror, was forcibly slashed out from the void. Sure kill -3476. A notification popped up above the fish intestines sword's head. As a murderous sword mistress, it was easier for her to deliver a sure kill or a fatal blow than other sword mistresses. But at the same time, a murderous sword mistress who was attacked by her opponent was more likely to be hit with a sure kill attack. Moreover, Her opponent was a terrifying fellow like the military governor. Fortunately, in order to get first place in the Treasured Swords group, the good people of Fantasyland had deliberately been stuck at the Treasured Swords level for about a year. With the accumulation of a large amount of resources, the sword essence on her had already reached an astonishing 80,000 quarks. Let alone a famed sword wielder, even a spirit sword wielder's requirements were almost there. So even though she received a sure kill attack like 3476, even though this attack was enough to instantly destroy most of the treasured sword mistress's personal shields, for the fish intestines sword, it was still bearable because the energy of her personal shield had already exceeded 10,000. It's fine. The fish intestines sword's personal shield can still withstand 2 more attacks of 3,476 points, and her sure kill attack has already exceeded 10,000 points. As long as the fish intestines sword can aim at the military governor's vitals, this military governor is dead for sure. The good people of Fantasyland calculated unhurriedly. This was the benefit of having a high sword essence. Although the heavenly sword's values were clearly higher than the fish intestines swords, because the difference between the sword essence of Gohan and the good people of Fantasyland was 60,000 quarks, more than 4 times, the data damage that Gohan had to bear was much more terrifying. It was to the point that one attack could send Gohan on his way. In other words, Gohan couldn't be hit by the fish intestines sword with one sure kill attack, or he couldn't be hit by the fish intestines sword's normal attack twice. Otherwise, Gohan would be instantly killed on the spot. Yi Xian, immediately restrain Gohan and let the fish intestines sword enter stealth mode. Even if your personal shield is shattered, you have to create an opportunity for the fish intestines sword. The good people of Fantasyland calmly commanded. His battle strategy was very clear, which was to let the Yi Xian sword sacrifice itself in exchange for the fish intestines sword, even if it only had one chance to hit. Seeing this scene, all the onlookers who were optimistic about the military governor suddenly couldn't stay calm. No matter how they looked at it, the good people of Fantasyland were even more awesome. Could it be that the military governor was going to be defeated by this somewhat disgusting guy? Chapter 622. Gohan was indeed entangled by the leisurely immortal sword. Because the owner of the leisurely immortal sword was the founder of the near-ancient era and the gravedigger of the Middle Ages, firearms had already begun to appear on the leisurely immortal sword. The flowing fairy sword's normal skill was, Western technique, increases the effect of stabbing when attacking. As long as the attack hits, the enemy will enter a bleeding state that lasts for 20 seconds. The enemy will lose 20 health points per second. Maximum of 3 bleeding states can exist at the same time. Cooldown, 10 seconds. The flowing fairy sword's passive skill was, My Good Doctor, 20% chance of recovering 10% of the user's lost health points or energy when attacking. The flowing fairy sword's advanced skill was, Firearms Revolution, summons 3 revolutionaries. The revolutionaries can use pistols in battle. Each bullet will cause 10 to 30 points of random damage. Maximum of 6 revolutionaries can be summoned at the same time. Cooldown, 1 minute. The flowing fairy sword's ultimate skill was mentioned before. It was called, Age of Cannons. Summons 20 red barbarian cannons to assist in battle. The cannons will cause 3 waves of melee damage within a 50 square meter radius. Each wave of melee damage is 1%, 3%, and 5% of the wielder's total sword essence. After all, the original owner of the flowing fairy sword was known as Big Pow Sunday. It was not unusual for him to summon 20 cannons. The combination of these skills formed the flowing fairy sword's reputation as the number 1 in the ancient sword tier. Firstly, the damage of her skills was higher than most sword mistresses. Moreover, her ultimate skill was a rare skill that determined the damage of the wielder's sword essence. Based on the 80,000 sword essence in Fantasyland's kindred fairy sword, a single ultimate skill would deal 7,900 damage. A normal sword tier wielder's kindred fairy sword's shield would not exceed 2,000 points. Even someone as strong as Gohan's kindred fairy sword's shield was only around 5,000 points. If he took a full set of flowing fairy sword's ultimate skills, Gohan might be killed instantly. However, Gohan was not afraid of this ultimate skill. After all, the ultimate skill was dead. As long as he escaped the range of the ultimate skill, he would be fine. The key was the flowing fairy sword's passive 20% chance to recover 10% of his lost HP. This made it difficult for Gohan. Combined with the 80,000 sword essence in Fantasyland's kindred fairy sword, the flowing fairy sword became a very powerful meat shield. Its powerful recovery allowed Gohan to attack her kindred fairy sword several times in a row. The flowing fairy sword had accomplished the task of keeping Gohan occupied. As for Fishbowl Sword, she had been hiding in the dark and had not made a move yet. The experience just now made Fishbowl Sword realize how terrifying Gohan was. If it wasn't an excellent opportunity, Fishbowl Sword would not make a move even if it died. After all, her kindred fairy sword could only withstand 2 more hits. She would not allow herself to fail again. Fishbowl Sword's cold eyes put Issien in an absolute crisis. Issien could recover and resist damage, but she could not harm Gohan. Her sword couldn't even touch Gohan's body. After fighting for a while, Gohan's kindred fairy sword didn't lose a single bit of energy. Although Issien's kindred fairy sword would occasionally recover a bar, it was immediately suppressed by Gohan's attacks. Her HP was still gradually decreasing until it reached a critical point. Fishbowl Sword, if you don't show up, Issien will collapse, Gohan said to the surrounding air, as if forcing Fishbowl Sword to show up. However, Fishbowl Sword remained unmoved. The surroundings were so quiet that only the sound of Issien's breathing could be heard. You're very good. Although I don't know why you have so much resentment in reality, you're not bad in the game. Gohan suddenly said to Issien. You've seen my real body? Issien attacked again, directly attacking Gohan's heart. Of course, this attack was blocked by Gohan without exception. Has my real body finally come into being? It came into being 2 months ago. I even fought your real body once. Your real body isn't as difficult to deal with as you are, Gohan replied, casually shaving off another chunk of Issien's HP. My real body has yet to wake up from its resentment. Its strength hasn't returned to its true level. Issien gasped. If you can see my real body again, tell her to log into the game. When that time comes, she'll understand how laughable the things she's hated for so many years are. I got it. Gohan nodded. Evidently, after living in the game for so long, the Issien sword in the game had already seen through her original hatred. These life experiences and memories were all gathered in her consciousness fragment. Once Issien entered the game, these consciousness fragments would return to Issien's consciousness. Issien would then instantly understand these life experiences and be able to let go of her hatred. This was indeed a good idea. Gohan made up his mind. When he met Liu Ling again, he would definitely convey this to Liu Ling, otherwise, there would be no end between Liu Ling and Issien. But if Issien returns, won't your existence disappear as well? Gohan asked curiously as he exchanged blows with Issien again. These Issien sword's consciousness fragments had formed independent personalities. Once they returned, their sense of self would inevitably disappear. Just like a stream that existed alone in a valley, it was a beautiful poem written by literati. But if it converged into a big river, who would know that it was once a beautiful stream? In the end, I can't escape. Issien smiled bitterly. It's as if I'm still going to be defeated by you. After saying this, Issien's personal shield completely shattered. According to the rules of the game, Issien had lost her combat ability and was not allowed to continue fighting with Gohan. Issien also began to retreat, returning to the side of the pale-faced good person in the fantasy land. Phew! Seeing Yi Xian leaving, Gohan let out a long sigh of relief. The battle with Yi Xian seemed to have consumed a lot of his energy. The moment he defeated Yi Xian, Gohan instinctively felt a little relaxed. Chance. At this moment, Yu Chang, who had been lurking in the dark, finally found its chance. The moment Gohan relaxed, the Yu Chang sword appeared in the middle of Gohan's back and stabbed straight into Gohan's body. Hit. Yu Chang was ecstatic. This feeling couldn't be wrong. This was the feeling of stabbing into the flesh. This sword wielder had finally been hit. As long as he took a hit from its sword, he would die. Yu Chang's sword hadn't finished thinking about it when it discovered to its horror that Gohan's cold face was facing it. The personal shield on its body was still there and hadn't broken. Yu Chang's sword hurriedly looked at the Yu Chang sword in its hand. The Yu Chang sword had indeed stabbed into the flesh, but it had actually stabbed its own body. The fishbowl sword was currently stabbed into Yu Chang's stomach. Perhaps it was because it was too excited, but it hadn't felt any pain until it discovered that the fishbowl sword was stabbed into its body. Only then did it feel an intense pain. The Yu Chang sword could be stabbed into the body, which meant one thing. The Yu Chang sword's personal shield had been broken. Yu Chang's sword had been defeated by its own treasured sword. Good. Amazing. F***ck, how did he win? The forum once again exploded out of habit. F***ck, did any of you see clearly what happened? Why did I only feel my eyes blur for a moment, and the sword went into Yu Chang's sword's stomach? Did my eyes go blind? Same question. Seeking an explanation. The forum was full of people asking what the hell the military governor was doing. How could the Yu Chang sword be stabbed into Yu Chang's sword's stomach? I'll explain it to everyone. Actually, I didn't see it clearly either. Very quickly, a player with the ID of Spirit Sword Grade Sword Wielder posted. Actually, just now, the commander did two actions. The first action was to extend two of his fingers and clamp onto the blade of the fish intestine sword. The second action was to borrow force to fight force. He used a skillful force to make the fish intestine sword turn, and finally, it directly stabbed into the fish intestine sword's stomach. There are still some details that I haven't seen clearly, but I can tell everyone with certainty that the commander is really too awesome. F***ck, why do I feel that even if I use my Muramasa, I still can't beat the commander? Previous poster. If you want to show off your spiritual sword level sword Maiden Muramasa, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Not only were the players on the forum deeply shocked by the commander's move, but even the Emperor's sword level sword wielders who had nothing better to do were shocked. Two Emperor's sword level sword wielders who were sitting together looked at each other. It was as if they were asking each other if the commander was an Emperor sword level, would they be able to defeat him? Then, the two Emperor sword level sword wielders smiled bitterly at the same time. The answer was very obvious. If the military governor had risen to that level, the first place of that level would have to be given to him. Were all the young people nowadays so F***king scary? As Yi Xian and Yu Chang's sword lost one after another, their personal shields broke and returned to the good guy from Fantasy Village. His defeat seemed to have been confirmed. It would take at least 3 minutes for the personal shields of the two sword maidens to reset. For a sword wielder who wasn't a sword master, 3 minutes was enough for his personal shields to break 2 or 3 times. Once the personal shields of the sword wielder were broken, it meant that the normal competition was over. From the looks of it, Gohan only needed 10 seconds to make the good guy from Fantasy Village leave on his own. Military Governor, you think you've already won. Let me tell you, you can't beat me. I still have a final trump card that I haven't used. The good guy from Fantasy Village said angrily. I know. Gohan nodded. You haven't used the special skill of your formation, so I'm waiting here for you to use that skill. Please hurry up. I can bear with you for 10 seconds at most. If you don't use your special skill in 10 seconds, I'll send you down. Trust me, it only takes 5 seconds to break your personal shield. Chapter 623. Hearing Gohan's disdainful words, the good guy from Fantasyland was naturally furious. He suddenly felt like he had become a clown, and Gohan was a hero who was set off by his clown. When I defeat you, it will be the time when your reputation as a hero is ruined. The good guy from Fantasyland thought hatefully and said in a deep voice, "Fine. Since you're looking for death, don't blame me for being rude. I'll let you see the true power of the yin and yang fusion sword formation." The good guy from Fantasyland put his palms together and closed his eyes, as if he was mobilizing the sword essence and sword mark in his body. At the same time, the Yi Xian sword and the Yuchang sword suddenly showed an extremely painful expression on their faces. Then, they turned into a ray of light at the same time and merged together. After a few seconds, the merged light dissipated, and a new sword lady appeared in front of Gohan. This sword maiden looked somewhat like a graceful immortal, but also somewhat like a fishbowl sword. The sword she held in her hand was also a fusion of the graceful immortal and fishbowl sword's characteristics. The blood-red blade was tied with a dark red ribbon. So this is the power of the yin and yang fusion sword formation. It can actually merge two sword ladies into one. Seeing this scene, Gohan said in admiration, "Not bad, military governor, you really have a good eye. This is the power of the yin and yang fusion sword formation. Now that the Yi Xian sword and the Yuchang sword have merged into a new sword lady, her power is the sum of the Yi Xian sword and the Yuchang sword. I call her the Yuchang sword." He had to complain about the naming ability of the good guy from Fantasyland. Wasn't it just a combination of the names of the Yuchang sword and the Yi Xian sword? It was really too uncreative. However, when he thought about it, compared to a certain unlucky child named Duyu Sword, this Yu Xianjian could be considered a lucky child. Let me ask you, when the competition is over, will the Yuchang sword and Yi Xian sword return to normal? The good guy from Fantasyland was stunned when Gohan suddenly asked such a question. He nodded unconsciously. "Of course they will, otherwise I'll be invincible." "That's good." Gohan nodded. If the Yi Xian sword and the Yuchang sword couldn't be restored, then Gohan would really teach this good guy from the land of fantasy a lesson. This kind of crazy thing, which was equivalent to erasing the existence of two sword maidens, made Gohan hate this good person from the land of fantasy from the bottom of his heart. "Forget it, then I won't hold back. Let's get rid of this guy quickly," Gohan silently thought. It turned out that Gohan had been holding back just now. Just as Gohan was thinking about ending the battle quickly, the forum was in an uproar. No one had expected to witness such a magical scene. The two sword ladies actually fused together and became a brand new sword lady. This was something unheard of. Moreover, just like how angry Gohan was just now, many players were also angry when they saw this situation. This kind of fusion was equivalent to erasing the existence of the sword lady. It would be fine if it was only for a moment, but if it was a permanent fusion, then these players planned to collectively complain to the system and ask for this horrifying sword formation to be removed. However, there were also some players who were very interested in this new Yuchang sword's combat power. According to what the good guy from Fantasyland had said, this Yuchang sword's combat power was equivalent to the attributes of two sword ladies added together. According to the logic of 1 + 1 is equal to 2, this new Yuchang sword, together with the good guy from Fantasyland's 80,000 swords, could very well pose a fatal threat to the military governor. It's over. This time, the military governor is really in danger. No matter how you look at it, this Yuchang sword is already equivalent to a top-notch sword lady of the famed sword grade. Even if it were to go against the top few famed sword grade, I'm afraid it would be a huge fight. This time, the military governor is really in danger. I think so too. It's already very impressive that the military governor could come this far. After all, he's facing a guy who's using cheats, isn't he? The forum was generally not optimistic about the military governor. This was because this fused Yuchang sword was really too powerful. Moreover, this Yuchang sword soon showed that other than its attributes, it was also very powerful in another aspect. "Yuchang, kill!" shouted the good guy from Fantasyland. Immediately, the Yuchang sword disappeared in front of Gohan. As expected, the fused Yuchang sword had inherited the fishbowl sword's skill and had the ability to turn invisible. "Yuchang, let the military governor have a taste of the power of our brand new revolutionary warriors," ordered the good guy from Fantasyland again. However, the strange thing was that nothing seemed to have changed. No revolutionary warriors were summoned. Could it be that the good guy from Fantasyland was shouting at Gohan? Of course, Gohan did not think that he had already discovered that there were a few unfamiliar auras in the surroundings. However, the owners of these auras were the same as the Yuchang sword. They were all in a state of invisibility. Just as Gohan discovered this, 3 bullets suddenly shot out from 3 unknown points in the distance. Gohan did not seem to be able to dodge in time. He forcefully swallowed all 3 bullets and hit Gohan's personal shield. Hooray! Seeing this scene, the good guy from Fantasyland was so excited that he almost jumped up. After fighting for so long, he had finally caused damage to the military governor. It seemed that since the start of the battle, his 2 sword maidens had been toyed with by the military governor. They had not caused any damage to Gohan. Now, a gap had finally been opened in the military governor's invincible golden body. As long as he followed this gap, his Yuchang sword would be able to tear the military governor into pieces. 50 damage. There's also a fatal 300 damage. Oh, even the bullets are invisible. I understand now. Gohan mumbled to himself. F***ck. The military governor is injured. It's over. Why do I feel that the few $100s I spent on the military governor are going to go down the drain? An unlucky guy who had obviously bought the peripherals lamented. What the hell is going on? Why is it that I haven't seen anyone, and the admiral is already injured? Don't you understand? Obviously, the Yuchang sword not only merged the basic attributes of the Yuchang sword and the Ishin sword, but also merged the skills. This was originally the advanced skill of the Ishin sword, revolutionary. Could not be invisible, and the damage was at most 20 points. But now, look, these revolutionary are all invisible. The upper limit of the bullet's damage has also been increased to 50. That's why it can cause a fatal effect. Isn't this the advanced skill of the Yuchang sword? It's over. The peripherals I bought are really finished. Ha ha ha. Military governor, are you afraid now? Don't worry, there's more fun waiting for you. Yuchang, serve the dishes. As soon as the good guy from the fantasy village finished speaking, there was a violent roar around the ring. The good guy from the fantasy village actually let the Yuchang sword use its ultimate skill. Just like before, 60 invisible cannons fired at the same time, and the area was increased by several times. Other than the area where the good guy from the fantasy village was standing, almost all of the ring was covered by the ultimate skill. The number of cannons also increased from 3 waves to 6 waves, respectively dealing 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6% damage. Altogether, it was equivalent to 21% of the total damage of the good guy from the fantasy village, which was 16,800 damage. It was enough to kill Gohan twice. From the looks of it, Gohan seemed to be dead for sure. For a guy like Gohan who was good at dodging, there was no way he could deal with an area of effect attack like the cannons. But the good guy from the fantasy village was still worried. He left and ordered the Yuchang sword, "Go kill the military governor under the cover of the cannons. Even if his personal shield is broken, don't stop. I must kill him until there's only a corpse left." "I can't do that." Unexpectedly, in the face of the good guy's order, the Yuchang sword, who had always been very obedient, suddenly replied. "Yuchang, are you going to disobey my order?" The good guy from the fantasy village asked angrily. No, master, the military governor is no longer under the cover of the cannons. The Yuchang sword's voice was dry, as if it had completely lost its intelligence. Then where is the military governor? The good guy from the fantasy village suddenly had an extremely bad feeling. There's no need to look, I'm here. The military governor's voice came from behind the good guy from the fantasy village. Just like the bad feeling, the military governor actually broke through the coverage of the cannons in an instant and ran behind the good guy. Yuchang, come and save me. The good guy from the fantasy village was quite decisive. He immediately began to rush towards the position of the Yuchang sword, trying to meet up with him. Only then would the good guy from the fantasy village have a chance of survival. I told you, I only need 5 seconds to kill you. Gohan's voice sounded like a demon in the ears of the good guy from the fantasy village. Although the Yuchang sword tried his best to come to the rescue, the good guy from the fantasy village still had his personal shield broken by the military governor within 3 seconds. The reason why he was 2 seconds faster was that the Yuchang sword's ultimate skill seemed to ignore friend and foe. When the good guy from the fantasy village rushed towards the Yuchang sword to meet up with him, he inevitably rushed into the range of the ultimate skill. The good guy from the fantasy village took 2 waves of damage from his own ultimate skill, and about 40% of the energy of his personal shield was consumed. And Gohan had to drink a mouthful of green plum wine and transform into his hero form. Only then did he take 2 waves of damage from the ultimate skill and successfully defeat the good guy from the fantasy village. Military governor, you're amazing. I, the good guy from the fantasy village, am convinced. The good guy from the fantasy village was very straightforward. As soon as his personal shield was broken, he immediately bowed his head and admitted defeat. No, you're not convinced. You just think that admitting defeat now will prevent your image from falling too badly. Am I right? Gohan had coldly seen through the thoughts of the good people of Fantasy Village, causing their faces to turn green and white. Military governor, you've already won. Do you still want to bully a pitiful loser like me? The good guy from the Fantasy Village looked sad. I'm not interested in bullying you. I just want to tell you that in the future, don't fuse with the Yuchang sword. She doesn't have her own consciousness at all. In front of a real expert, it's not as good as the cooperation between the fish guts and Yi Xian. After saying that, Gohan disappeared from the arena. He did not want to stand together with this person anymore. Chapter 624. After Gohan won first place in the Treasured Swords group, the competition moved on to the famed Swords group. Dragon Feather was up against Watermelon Gentleman. After a fierce battle, Dragon Feather was superior and defeated Watermelon Gentleman, taking first place in the famed Swords group. He dominated all the famed Swords players and became the undisputed first place in the famed Swords group. After that, Yao Guang took first place in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy group. Yao Guang won the championship even though he had a huge lead. His opponents in the finals were not as strong as his opponents in the semifinals. The finals of the Emperor Sword group lasted the longest. It lasted from 5 in the afternoon to 2 in the morning. In the end, the champion of the virtual Emperor Sword leaderboard, 10 square fragments, became the defending champion. Because the battle lasted until 2 in the morning, the damned award ceremony was also held at 2 in the morning. Although the award ceremony at 2 in the morning was a little strange, in the past 200 years, the Emperor Sword level swordsman had to fight for 7 to 8 hours before the winner could be decided. Looking at it this way, it was not strange at all. The award ceremony was also held in the order of Ancient Swords to Emperor Swords. The champion of the Ancient Sword level stood on the stage with tears streaming down his face. He received the heavy trophy from the MC and a bottle of Jiansu oral solution with 1,000 quarks of Jiansu oral solution. He was so excited that he could not speak. In any case, there would be a Zhuangyuan every 4 years, but the first place of the 8-city sword duel would take a full 10 years. That's right, this trophy did not only exist in the game. It also had a physical body in real life. A professional person would send the trophy to the hands of the player in real life, and it would become the glory of a lifetime. Of course, the whole process was extremely confidential. The real identity of the player in real life would not be revealed. Unless the player wanted to be famous in real life, no one would know who had won the trophy in real life. Seeing how excited the champion of the ancient sword level was, it seemed like he would not hide his identity in real life. What was the point of hiding his identity? As long as he revealed his identity as the champion of the ancient sword group, even if he was just a normal person, he would immediately get the attention of the media. Then, some girls around him would take the initiative to throw themselves at him. How wonderful! That's right, as the champion of the ancient sword competition, this player received an additional reward, a golden egg. According to the rules, the player had to open the twisted egg in front of all the other players to see what kind of treasure was hidden inside. Unfortunately, when the champion of the ancient sword ranking tournament opened the golden egg, there was only a measly 10,000 renminbi in it. Through the live broadcast, the player's face fell. Such a valuable golden egg only had 10,000 renminbi in it. Was there still any justice in the world? After this unlucky top 8 from the ancient sword group left the stage, it was Gohan's turn for the top 8 of the treasured sword group to go up. Of course, at the beginning, it was the host who wanted to say a bunch of nonsense. Gohan habitually ignored this nonsense. He received his trophy and reward from the hands of the awarding NPC, as well as the envious and jealous gazes of the people around him. It was an oral solution containing 5,000 sword elements and a golden egg. Although Gohan wanted to drink the oral solution right away, he could not do it now. Otherwise, he would not be able to hold the competition the next day. If he really wanted to drink it, he would have to wait for a while. However, he could open the golden egg now. To be honest, Gohan didn't have much of an interest in the twisted balls anymore. In the past few days, Gohan had cleared all the ancient sword ranking and treasured sword ranking dungeons that he could. All of them were SSS rank, and he had obtained more than 20 golden eggs. Unfortunately, Gohan seemed to have used up his luck. These 20 golden eggs only gave some normal rewards. None of them could make Gohan's eyes light up. On the other hand, the good guy from Fantasy Village, who was one step ahead of Gohan, had better luck. He obtained a purple twisted egg. The good guy from Fantasy Village was the first to open the twisted egg, and a token of the sword mistress fell out of it. Flaming hairpin of the victorious sword. Special item. Tradable. Unbound. Drops on death. Easily damaged. Description: the flaming hairpin on the head of the victorious sword. It is the victorious sword's favorite accessory. Function: collect 10 hairpins and give them to Bai Taijian to gain the favor of the victorious sword. Synchronize with her and become the wielder of the victorious sword. Note: due to differences in bloodline and genes, there is a certain chance that synchronization will fail. The hairpin will disappear upon failure. The person from Fantasy Village had actually obtained a token of the Celestial Sword Lady's victorious sword. This thing could easily be sold for 7 or 8 million in an auction house. What made Gohan even more speechless was that this token was the victorious sword. This was the Celestial Sword Lady's victorious sword that Gohan had already placed on him in real life. How could Gohan endure this? Wow! So this person from Fantasy Village is a European. He actually obtained a token of the Celestial Sword Lady's victorious sword lady. His luck is too good. The surrounding crowd was drooling. A token of the Celestial Sword Lady's victorious sword was definitely a top-notch reward among the golden eggs. Even 100 golden eggs could not obtain a token of the Celestial Sword Lady's victorious sword lady. Moreover, this was from a single purple egg. Even 10,000 purple eggs would not be able to produce an immortal sword-grade sword lady's keepsake. Seeing that he had gotten a good reward, the good man of Fantasyland's face, which was like a dead fish, finally looked better. He looked at Gohan proudly and said, "What do you think? Do you have the ability to open a better treasure than mine?" The good guy from the land of fantasy continued to say, "Let me tell you, I have already succeeded in synchronizing in real life and have become a treasured sword wielder. This token of the Sword of Victory is God telling me that I will definitely be able to synchronize the Sword of Victory in the future and become an immortal sword wielder. Your first place in the treasured sword group is nothing. No, you will never have the chance to coordinate the Sword of Victory," Gohan said indifferently as he looked at the little rooster that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Nonsense, the Sword of Victory was in Gohan's hands. How could the good guy from the land of Fantasyland have a share? Unfortunately, the good guy from the land of Fantasyland did not think of this at all. He only thought that Gohan was jealous of him and gave Gohan a dirty look. "Don't look down on me. Just you wait. The Sword of Victory will definitely belong to me, Li Fengyun." This child had actually unknowingly revealed his real name. Dear viewers, what treasure is hidden in the golden egg that our Mr. Military Governor obtained? Let us wait and see. The camera turned to Gohan. Without hesitation, Gohan opened the golden egg. With a flash of light, a rectangular brocade box appeared in Gohan's hands. Dear viewers, a brocade box has appeared. Everyone, take a guess. What treasure is hidden in this brocade box? The host said excitedly. Dear host, can you change your lines? We're all tired of hearing this line, okay? Others might not know what was inside the brocade box, but Gohan was very clear. When Gohan opened the egg for the first time in the Instance Dungeons Settlement Center, didn't he also obtain a brocade box? Inside the brocade box was the King of Uzgojian's sword that Gohan had lost and regained. Could it be that this brocade box also contained a sword? Sure enough, when Gohan opened the brocade box, he took out a pure white sword with a pair of wings from the brocade box. Dear viewers, the true face of this reward is finally revealed. Our military governor is indeed a European. He actually obtained a complete sword Maiden. This is truly amazing. The host's emotions infected the viewers, making them feel as if they were the ones who obtained the sword Maiden. They cheered together. I just don't know what level this sword Maiden is and what its name is. Mr. Military Governor, is it convenient for you to introduce it to us? Right now, only you can see the attributes and name of this sword Maiden. The host placed the microphone next to Gohan's mouth. Sword-grade sword Maiden, winged angel sword. Gohan calmly spat out the name. It seemed that this Lu Shihua was really his destined disciple. Otherwise, he could not obtain a sword Maiden, but he just had to obtain the winged angel sword that only Lu Shihua could use. Wow! It's actually the 5th-ranked sword Maiden, the winged angel sword. Mr. Military Governor's luck is too good. The supporter's face immediately revealed a somewhat regretful expression. It's a pity that you won't be able to use this treasure sword, Sir Sword Maiden. Furthermore, it doesn't seem to be easy to sell. The host was right. Although the winged angel sword was the 5th-ranked sword Maiden, theoretically it would not be a problem to sell it for tens of millions of RMB. However, the problem was that the winged angel sword could only be used by those with the angel bloodline. Since ancient times, only about 100 people with the angel bloodline had been discovered. This winged angel sword could not be sold because no one could use it at all. That was why the host felt that it was a pity. Not bad, I really like this reward, Gohan said very seriously. However, it was obvious that the other spectators thought that this was nonsense said by the military governor to save his face. Especially the good guy from the land of fantasy, he was even more pleased. He could not wait to throw his sword of victory at Gohan's face. Unfortunately, he was destined to not get what he wanted. After the most basic segment, Gohan directly exited the arena. This made the host, who wanted to interview Gohan a few more times, feel awkward. Chapter 625. The finals were over and the rewards were given out. It seemed like it was time for the 8-city sword tournament to end. After everyone received their rewards, they should go home and wait for another 10 years. Most of the competitions were like this. However, this was not the case for the Sword Among 8 Cities tournament. The end of the finals was only the first half of the Sword Among 8 Cities tournament. What was really exciting was the second half of the Sword Among 8 Cities tournament. It was the challenge matches that all the players were fascinated by, full of suspense and full of excitement. According to the statistics, the challenge tournament was the most watched competition among the 8-city sword tournament. The number of people who watched the main competition usually accounted for about 45% of all the players. However, the final challenge tournament accounted for 78% of all the players. More than 3/4 of the players watched the challenge tournament together. This was the most exciting part of the 8-city sword tournament. So what exactly was the challenge competition? Simply put, the junior would succeed the senior. A player of a lower level would challenge a player of a higher level. For example, an ancient sword player would challenge a treasured sword player, and a treasured sword player would challenge a famed sword player. It was conceivable that this would be an extremely difficult task. A battle between two sword-bearers of a lower level would definitely be extremely difficult. At the same time, this battle would also be very entertaining, full of thrilling gimmick. Of course, this was not an easy thing to do. Only the top players could do it. In order to prevent the challenge tournament from becoming a boring one-sided battle, only the top players among the top players were qualified to participate in the challenge tournament. According to the rules of the 8-city sword tournament, only the top player of the group was qualified to participate in the challenge tournament. In other words, only players like Gohan who had won the championship could participate in the challenge tournament. This was the real reason why Gohan participated in the 8-city sword tournament. The rewards given in the challenge tournament were the ones that could really move Gohan. They were far more exciting and powerful than the reward of the first place in the treasured sword level. According to the rules of the challenge tournament, the rewards were not given by the system. They were taken from the players. Take Gohan as an example. If Gohan could defeat a player in the famed sword group, then the sword essence oral fluid obtained by that player would become Gohan's sword essence oral fluid. On the other hand, if Gohan lost, the sword essence oral fluid in Gohan's hands would become that player's. Therefore, Gohan didn't drink his sword element oral solution. Once he drank it, he would automatically lose the qualification to participate in the challenge. He didn't even have a stake, so how could he participate in the gamble? Speaking of gambling, in the system's activity interface, there was a public gambling option called the Sword Tournament Welfare Lottery. This was an option that would only appear when the finals were over and the Challenger League had begun. At this time, everyone could place their bets on the Sword-on-Sword Welfare Lottery event page. The wager was RMB, and the bets were based on how far the players who participated in the Challenger League could advance. Taking Gohan as an example, Gohan was one of the bets that the players were betting on in the Challenger League. There were a few options. First, Gohan failed the challenge and was unable to defeat any opponent in the famed sword group. Odds 150. 000. In other words, if you bet that Gohan would not be able to defeat any of the opponents in the famed swords group, you would receive a reward of 150 times your bet. Don't ever doubt that the banker or the system would lose money with this payout, because this payout was calculated through an extremely complicated algorithm. The system took 30% of the winnings as a bonus and calculated it, so it would definitely not lose money. In other words, most of the players who had bought the lottery felt that it was impossible for Gohan to be unable to defeat a famed sword-level opponent. The number of people who bought this option was pitifully small, not even 1/150 of them. Second, Gohan succeeded the challenge and was able to defeat players below the top 128. Odds 112. 223. This meant that most gamblers believed that Gohan would be able to defeat players above the top 128 in the famed sword level. That was why the odds were still as high as 12 times. Third, Gohan succeeded the challenge and was able to defeat players above the top 128 but below the top 16. Odds 1-1. 589. Fourth, Gohan succeeded the challenge and was able to defeat players above the top 16 but below the top 4. Odds 1 o'clock. 256. At this moment, the payout rate had actually dropped by 5 times. The payout rate for $10 was $2-3 at most. This meant that in the hearts of most gamblers, Gohan's strength was around the top 16 to the top 4 of the famed sword level. This was already quite a high opinion of Gohan. In the history of the Challenger League, there had only been one treasured sword-level player who had managed to defeat a famed sword-level player who was ranked in the top 4 and above, becoming the only treasured sword-level player in the 8 Cities tournament. Everyone should have heard of this player many times. He was the Double Sword Emperor in the game and in real life, the creator of the Great Ocean Waves, Sword Emperor Gu Jinfeng. However, the odds for Gu Jin Bureaucrat's fourth option were only 1-225, and the odds for his third option were 1 o'clock. 312. This meant that the gamblers thought that Gu Jin Bureaucrat was more likely to defeat players above the top 128 but below the top 16, not players above the top 16 but below the top 4. In the eyes of the current players, Gohan was already stronger than Gu Jin Bureaucrat of the past. There was nothing much to say about the odds for the following options. The odds for buying the fifth option, Gohan could defeat the top player of the famed sword level, had risen to 1-5-687, and the odds for the sixth option, Gohan could defeat a spirit sword level player, had fallen to 1-128-047, which was the same odds as those who thought that Gohan could not defeat a famed sword level player. Defeating a spirit sword level swordsman as a treasured sword level swordsman? This was something that Gu Jin Bureaucrat could not do back then. As for the following options, such as defeating the top 128, top 16, first place, and so on, the odds had soared to thousands of times. There was also the option to defeat an immortal sword-level swordsman. The odds were as high as hundreds of thousands of times. Because no one was buying, the odds were naturally infinitely high. Gohan looked at his account. After such a long time of accumulating rewards, it had actually accumulated to as much as 70 million renminbi. This was not a small amount. If he made the wrong choice, he would lose all of it. Fine. Fortune comes from danger. Just as Gohan was about to click on an option, Tomono Kakaze's voice suddenly appeared in Gohan's ear. "Gohan, you can't buy this lottery ticket." "Why?" Gohan was stunned and asked. "You're usually so smart, but why are you so stupid now?" Tomono Kakaze's childlike voice was very unhappy. "If you bet that you can only defeat the top 128 and then deliberately lose to the opponent, what fairness is there to speak of? Victory and defeat are all in your hands. This is equivalent to manipulating the game, do you understand?" "Of course I understand this." Gohan nodded. "I promise I will definitely go all out, is that okay?" "You say you will go all out and I will believe you." Gohan could imagine the look of Tomono Kakaze on the other end of the call, looking at a fool. "Even if I believe it, will the other players believe it? Unless you bet on the option that you can defeat the spiritual sword top 16 and above, no one will believe that you will go all out. So, according to what you mean, as long as I buy the option of the spiritual sword top 16 and above, it will be okay, right?" Gohan asked. "Hey, don't you think that you can really defeat the spiritual sword-level swordsman?" Tamono Kakashi asked in surprise. You don't have to worry about this, you just need to tell me whether it is okay or not. Yes, it is totally okay, Tamono Kakashi said generously. Anyway, I can't get a share of the bet. As long as you can prove that you will go all out and not fake the game, that is enough. You can choose the option of the spiritual sword top 16. Thank you. Gohan cupped his hands towards Tachibana and clicked on a certain option. In an instant, he spent all of his 70 million renminbi on it. You're a madman. Seeing the option that Gohan had chosen and the odds that had been reduced from 140,000 to 390 times, Tamono Kakashi felt as if she had seen a madman. Was this Gohan a fool, or was he too confident? So you're the military governor that little Een mentioned. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when Gohan was about to go offline, he unexpectedly found that Lu Shihua was still online, and she even contacted him through the communication device to ask to meet. Thus, Gohan brought Lu Shihua to his home. The first sentence that Lu Shihua said when they met was this. I'm the military governor, is that strange? Gohan curled his lips. Did I hide my game name from you? No, I mean, I didn't expect you to be so famous. You're the person that little Een mentioned who charged 5 yuan to read the post. Lu Shihua lowered her head and was silent for a while. I watched the live broadcast today. I didn't expect you to be so strong that I can't even compare to a single hair of yours. So what do you think? Gohan asked with a smile. So, can you teach me a little more? Don't always teach me those repetitive basic sword technique. I can even repeat those things in my dreams. There was some resentment in Lu Shihua's words. She had been practicing with Gohan for several days, but Gohan always taught her the same basic sword techniques over and over again. This made Lu Shihua, who was extremely talented, very helpless and dissatisfied. She felt that she had reached the end of these basic sword techniques, and there would be no growth even if she continued to practice them. Especially when she found out that Gohan was so strong today, the resentment in her heart about Gohan instantly broke out. You want to become stronger. This makes me very happy. I also hope that you can become stronger and become a hindrance to me in the future. Gohan touched Lu Shihua's head. When Lu Shihua's head was pressed by Gohan's hand, she instantly calmed down, and her original resentment seemed to disappear without a trace. Don't ever think that basic sword techniques can't improve you, because a person's foundation will never be solid. Back then, I also practiced basic sword techniques for 3 years to achieve what I have now. Even until today, I have to practice basic sword techniques again every day, do you understand? Don't worry. I've already considered all aspects of your growth. Believe me, you'll understand my painstaking efforts very soon. Gohan patted Lu Shihua's head, and Lu Shihua moaned. This guy, he actually fell asleep comfortably in the game. Chapter 626. So what's your name? Qing Jian and Gu Yun sat on the bed and asked curiously as they looked at the woman they picked up from the roadside that they had casually thrown on the ground. My name is Lu Anna. The woman with long blonde hair and a huaxia face said blankly. So where is your home? Where do you live? How are you going to thank us for saving your life? Gu Yun asked hurriedly. Her meaning was clear. She wanted Lu Anna to find her family and then thank her for saving her life, although it was Qing Pin who fell from upstairs and knocked her unconscious. Home. As soon as Lu Anna thought of this word, she began to press her head in pain. Her expression was ferocious, her body twitched, and she was sweating all over, as if she was in great pain. Then she fainted again with a thump. It's over. Qing Pin, you must have heard her. If her family comes to find you, I'll throw you to them to apologize. Gu Yun said naughtily. No, if Qing Pin is gone, Gohan will be sad, and then Gohan will not want your stupid sister. Qing Pin fought back without showing any weakness. The two of them fought in an instant, and their clothes were disheveled until Lu Anna regained consciousness. Well, stop it. It's not good for you. Gu Yun pushed Qing Pin away from her and faced the confused Lu Anna again. She asked patiently like a little adult, "Have you lost your memory?" Lu Anna thought for a while and nodded decisively. It seemed that she really had lost her memory. "Can you tell me what you remember in your mind?" Gu Yun asked again. "My name is Lu Anna." After Lu Anna said these 5 words, Gu Yun waited for a long time, but she didn't say the 6th word. "Okay, I see." Gu Yun patted the bed. "You'll stay here for the night. Tomorrow I'll take you to the personal terminal administration. Hopefully your DNA data will be there. Speaking of which, your personal terminal disappeared too." "That's weird," Gu Yun muttered. When she picked up Lu Anna, Gu Yun found that Lu Anna's personal terminal had disappeared, just like her memory. But there were burn marks on her wrist, which meant that Lu Anna originally had a personal terminal, but for some reason, the personal terminal was destroyed. "It's so big." Just as Gu Yun was muttering, Qing Qiu looked at Lu Anna, who was climbing to the bed with envy. Because she was lying on her stomach, Lu Anna's 2 plump pieces of meat were hanging down, which looked as big as a volleyball. What a horrible size! Early in the morning, Gu Xianyuan woke up from her sleep. Today was the day of the Challenger League, so Gu Xianyuan had no choice but to wake up early. However, when Gu Xianyuan saw Lu Shihua lying beside her, she revealed a surprised expression. "Little Een, has your sister not logged out of the game yet?" "Really? I don't know," Lu Een replied without conscience, "but she has been wearing the helmet since I woke up at 6:00 in the morning." Gu Xianyuan shook her head, then put on the helmet and entered the game. As soon as she went out of her room, she saw Lu Shihua practicing basic swordsmanship in the courtyard at the door. Guhan took a few glances. The angle and speed of the sword were impeccable. Lu Shihua had practiced basic swordsmanship to a very high level. On the other hand, King Yu also stood aside and watched Lu Shihua practice swordsmanship. "Who is she? Why haven't I seen her before?" Guhan taught Lu Shihua in the martial arts arena of Yuzhong City. Except for the time when he explained the matter of third childshire, he had never brought Lu Shihua to his home. It was not strange that King Yu did not know Lu Shihua. "She is my future apprentice. With good training, she will be another sage Jiendi." Guhan told King Yu the truth. "So you are going to have a harem of Jiendi too?" King Yu pinched Guhan's waist. "She better be your apprentice. Otherwise, you will be in trouble." "What's wrong with King Yu? Are you in heat or jealous?" Guhan curled his lips. As expected, establishing a relationship with a woman was a very bad thing. He did not know when he would be jealous. "Mr. Military Governor, you are back." Seeing Guhan appear, Lu Shihua stopped practicing swordsmanship and came to Guhan's side respectfully and bowed. "Have you been practicing swordsmanship here since last night?" Guhan asked. "Yes, I can't sleep anyway, and there is nothing to do at home. I thought of Mr. Military Governor's words, so I want to practice more and build a stronger foundation," Lu Shihua said softly. This was indeed a good apprentice template. He had both talent and diligence. Such a disciple, Guhan had picked up a treasure. "Mr. Military Governor?" However, Lu Shihua's words seemed to have caused King Yu to have some kind of guess. She looked at Guhan unhappily. "Didn't you say that she is your apprentice? Because of some reasons, she can only officially become my apprentice after she becomes a swordsman in reality," Guhan explained. King Yu suddenly revealed a smile and said to Lu Shihua, "Hello, may I ask what your name is?" "Hello. My name is Lu Shihua. I am indebted to Mr. Military Governor's teachings. I hope that one day I can become Mr. Military Governor's disciple and serve by your side," Lu Shihua replied respectfully. As a disciple, it was a very normal thing to serve by his master's side. However, when this word entered King Yu's ears, it seemed a bit off. The word serve was a very important word in the spring and autumn warring states period that King Yu lived in. After all, in the warring states period, There were not many cases of men taking in female disciples. In other words, female disciples were a rare thing to begin with. Xihua, I saw you practicing by yourself just now. You must be very bored. Do you want me to accompany you for a few moves? Suddenly, King Yu asked. Accompany me to practice? Lu Xihua was overjoyed. She was worried that she could not improve by practicing by herself. If she could have someone to practice with her, she would definitely gain more. However, Lu Xihua was confused about the relationship between this woman and the military governor. Thus, Lu Xihua cast a questioning gaze at Guhan, trying to ask Guhan for his opinion. How could Guhan not know what King Yu was thinking? It was obvious that she wanted to use her status as a famous swordswoman to teach Lu Xihua, who was a novice swordsman, a lesson in swordsmanship. Generally speaking, there was no problem with this idea, because most swordswomen's swordsmanship could completely suppress their swordsmen. However, the problem was that King Yu had forgotten most of her swordsmanship. She had only been hastily taught by Guhan. Could she really deal with a talented novice like Lu Xihua? Sure, but you are only allowed to use swordsmanship. You are not allowed to use sword essence. Spar with swords, understand? Guhan warned, agreeing to this spar. The battle was quite tortuous. At the beginning, King Yu suppressed Lu Xihua. Although King Yu could not use sword essence, her physique was at the famed sword level. In terms of power and speed, she suppressed Lu Xihua, who was only at the ancient sword level. Moreover, Lu Xihua's sword moves were a bit awkward, and she could not master them. Thus, at the beginning of the spar, Lu Xihua was surrounded by danger and was almost defeated by King Yu. However, as the battle continued, the situation kept turning. As the swords of both sides clashed, Lu Xihua gradually mixed the basic moves together. The sword moves were no longer stiff, and instead seemed to be a whole. At this time, the consequences of King Yu's lack of skill were revealed. Although he could suppress Lu Xihua with his strength, if he continued to fight, he might fail miserably in a simple task. If King Yu lost to Lu Xihua, what would happen? Thinking of this, Guhan felt a headache. Alright. The challenge is about to begin. Guhan pulled out a sword from Shuang Yuan's pocket and threw it towards the two of them. The sword hit the point where Lu Xihua and King Yu's blades met, forcefully separating the two of them. Stop fighting, there's no time. That's it for today. If there's a chance in the future, we'll spar again. Guhan took the initiative to pull Queen Yu to his side and embraced her. He smiled at the unconvinced Queen Yu and said, Accompany me to the Sword Firmament Pavilion, and we'll go participate in the competition today. Who cares? King Yu instinctively wanted to show her disdain, but she immediately reacted and asked in surprise, Didn't you always want to take me to that stupid competition? Why am I going today? That's because the sword ladies before could only be below the treasured sword level. The rules forbid me from taking you there, and it would also expose my trump card. Guhan smirked, but now it's the challenge. As long as I'm willing, even if I use an Emperor Sword Lady, there's no problem with the rules. King Yu, listen to me, it's time for everyone in the game to know that you're my Sword Lady. Everyone in the game knows that I'm your Sword Lady. Hearing Guhan's words, King Yu couldn't help but become intoxicated. Speaking of which, everyone knew that the military governor was a treasured sword wielder and that his sword lady was the heavenly sword, but no one knew about the existence of King Yu's Gojian sword. Now that King Yu had finally appeared, how could he not be excited? Mr. Military Governor, your sword. Just as King Yu was about to stick to Guhan, Lu Xihua untactfully jumped out. He held the sword that Guhan had thrown out and respectfully returned it to Guhan. This isn't my sword. From today onwards, this sword is yours. Guhan waved his hand. The sword he had thrown out was the two-winged angel sword, the prize from opening the egg. Other than Lu Xihua, there was probably no one else in the game who could use this sword. If he didn't give her to Lu Xihua, what else could he do? Thank you, Master. Seeing the two-winged angel sword, Lu Shihua was moved. She quietly said, "Master." Other than herself, no one else could hear her. Chapter 627. Strange, I can't find it at all. In the Personal Terminal Administration Bureau, a staff member checked Lu Anna's genes and said strangely, "This person's genes are not stored in our database. I can't find her personal information." How is it possible? Can't you find any information at all? Qingpin pointed at the staff member's head with her little finger and asked condescendingly. She was so imposing. Strange, how could a little girl like Qingpin look down on an adult? Little girl, can you go down first? The counter is not for you to stand on, the staff member said helplessly. It turned out that Qingpin could look down on her because she was standing on the counter. But the staff member saw that she was a child, so she held back her anger. Tell me who this person is, and I'll go down. Otherwise, I won't go down even if you kill me. It was good for Qingpin to be young. At least when she was angry, no one really dared to do anything to her. The staff member could only coax this unlucky child. Hey little girl, it's not that I don't want to tell you who she is. It's because we don't have her information, the staff member explained with a wry smile. Sister, don't be angry with my sister. She is still young and ignorant. What kind of person is she? Her information is not in the database. Gu Yun, who was actually a little shorter than Qingpin, said hurriedly. This made the staff member even more shocked. Whose children were these? One was younger than a 3-year-old child, and the other seemed to be a 30-year-old adult. There are 3 possibilities. The staff member raised her finger. The first possibility is that she is not from Yuzhong City. She is from 7 other cities. Naturally, we can't find her information in the database of Yuzhong City. If you want to check, you have to go to the city where she belongs or the headquarters in Yanjing City. The second possibility is that she is an official of the council with a confidentiality level above A. Such an identity can't be found in the Personal Terminal Administration Bureau in the ordinary area. You have to go to the Personal Terminal Administration Bureau of the Sword Committee to find her. Thirdly, she is a sword bearer. All the information has been transferred to the Sword Bearers Service Center, so we can only go to the Sword Bearers Personal Information Bureau in the Sword Bearers Service Center to find out. The waiter said all 3 possible situations, so Qingpin and Gu Yun were in a dilemma. If it was the first possibility, then they needed to go to Yanjing City, which was impossible for Gu Yun and Qingpin. As for the second and third possibilities, they would have to go to a sword-bearers service center. There were sword-bearers everywhere, and Qingpin and Gu Yun's identities would be easily recognized. Then, they would be treated as lost sword ladies and treated well by the sword-bearers service center. Even though this wasn't bad, they would lose their freedom completely. Before Gohan returned, they wouldn't be able to leave the sword-bearers service center. How could the 2 lively sword ladies be willing to do that? For a moment, Lu Anna seemed to be out of his control. By the way, who are you people? Where are the adults in your family? Why would they let you 2 kids come out? At this time, the waiter found that something was wrong. There were no adults following the 2 kids. Give me your personal terminals. I want to contact your adults. The waiter was a responsible good person. He was afraid that the 2 kids had been harmed by some bad guys, so he wanted to check their personal terminals and contact their parents. In the end, when he took a closer look, he realized that the little brat standing on the counter didn't seem to have a personal terminal in his hand. Kid, where is your personal terminal? Before the waiter finished speaking, Qingpin pulled Gu Yun down from the counter. Then Gu Yun said very quickly, Sister, we found Miss Lu Anna on the roadside. She has lost her memory and can't remember who she is. We will leave her here. You can send her to the shelter. After that, Gu Yun left Lu Anna there and ran away with Qingpin. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the hall. Are the children nowadays so bold? The waiter shook his head and turned to Lu Anna, who was left behind. Miss Lu Anna, please wait here. I will contact the shelter right away. You can live there temporarily. The waiter lowered his head and pressed his personal terminal. When he raised his head again, Lu Anna disappeared without a trace, as if she had never appeared here. Damn it, did I see a ghost today? The waiter touched his forehead and looked a little absent-minded. What are we doing here? King Yu, who followed Gohan all the way, found that Gohan did not directly enter the competition venue. Instead, he took him to a huge building like a five-star hotel. There was no doubt that this was the Sword Pavilion of Yuzhong City. My ability is not enough, Gohan whispered. If I want to achieve my goal, I must have new combat power. So, you brought me to the Sword Pavilion? King Yu was suddenly enlightened. Apart from synchronizing with the new Sword Lady, was there anything else to do here? Thinking of this, King Yu's face instantly turned livid. What level of Sword Lady do you want to synchronize with? Do you already have 100,000 sword elements? King Yu's words were full of fear. How is that possible? How can I accumulate 100,000 sword elements in less than half a year? Gohan's voice was still calm. I only have 15,000 sword elements now. I understand. You think I'm useless, right? King Yu showed a desperate expression. I know I'm not capable. I can't even defeat your new disciple. It's normal for you to replace me. I'm a hindrance to you. I'm not worthy of you. What the hell are you thinking? A few black lines appeared on Gohan's forehead. When did I say I was going to replace you? Since you only have 15,000 sword elements, are you here to synchronize with the Sword Lady of the famous sword rank? Aren't you just going to replace me with a better Sword Lady? King Yu said in grief. Could it be that falling in love really makes a woman a fool? Gohan sighed and pulled King Yu's hand. Did you forget that you used my grafting technique to become a Sword Lady? That's why I can have two famous sword rank Sword Ladies at the same time. I'm only here to synchronize with my second famous sword rank Sword Lady, understand? Hearing Gohan's explanation, King Yu felt embarrassed. He wanted to find a hole to hide in. What the hell was going on? How could he forget such an important thing? Although he could not dig a hole, he could still dig a sword sheath. Without saying a word, King Yu turned back into his sword form and went back into his sword sheath. She probably would not come out unless she had to. Gohan curled his lips and walked to the front of the counter. Hello, sir, what service do you need? The NPC attendant at the counter asked with a smile. I want to find a Sword Lady to synchronize. Gohan replied. Confirm. Do you want to synchronize with the natural Sword Lady? If you only want to synchronize with the artificial Sword Lady, you can go to Toad Street and buy an artificial Sword Lady there to synchronize. If you are sure that you want to synchronize with the natural Sword Lady, please show me the token you have collected. The NPC's words were still filled with love and formality. Gohan took out 10 Juzi sword tokens and placed them in front of the counter. The attendant took the tokens and a light flashed in her eyes. After scanning the tokens, it was like scanning a QR code. Sorry, I can't find your token information. You can't synchronize with the Sword Lady. The attendant was still full of smiles. After all, she was an NPC. What did you say? Gohan was shocked. There was no information about the Juzi sword token in the Sword Pavilion? Then why did the system design the token for the Juzi sword? Is my token fake? Gohan asked again. No, your token is real, but the Sword Pavilion can't find the information it represents. This anomaly has been reported to a higher level of intelligence. Please wait for a moment. As expected, after a while, the NPC who had nothing but a smile on her face suddenly became lively. Hey Gohan, why did you make such big news again? Can you let me rest for a while and have a cup of coffee? Without a doubt, the person who was attached to the NPC attendant was Tomono Kakashi. If it's possible, I hope that I can never trouble you. Gohan spread out his tokens and placed them on the counter. Take a look. What's going on inside? Why did the NPC say that there was no information about the Juzi sword? There's no need to look. I've already figured it out. This is also the secret door that I Ching left behind. I didn't expect that there would be a secret door in the sword pavilion. Other than you, who else could have encountered this secret door? Tomono Kakaze said as she played with the wood crows. You mean, this token for the Juzi sword was actually left behind by I Ching? Gohan said thoughtfully. That's right. There are only 10 tokens for the Juzi sword in the entire game, and they are all in your hands. Even I can't make a copy of one. If this wasn't left behind by I Ching, who else could it be? Tomono Kakaze put down the wood crows in her hands and looked at Gohan curiously. Hey, what did you do to I Ching? Why is the great Jiandi so good to you? He almost gave himself to you. If it was possible, I Ching might even want to give himself to me. This thought suddenly popped up in Gohan's mind. He quickly shook his head and threw this ridiculous thought out of his mind. What's the situation now? Can I still synchronize with the Juzi sword? Chapter 628. I don't think so. The NPC possessed by Tomono Kakaze held her face and said in confusion, I don't know why, although I Ching imported the token of Juzi sword into the game, the data of Juzi sword doesn't exist in the game. Where can I get you a Juzi sword? I really don't know what I Ching is thinking. Why did she prepare a non-existent blade master for you? So, the biggest problem now is that I can't find the data of Juzi sword. Gohan kept knocking on the counter. If you have the data of Juzi sword, can you get it out for me? There's another small problem. Tomono Kakaze pinched her face. Adding the data of a famed sword blade master is a big deal. It must be approved by the manager, that pervert Xian. Without his permission, any external data can't be written into my core database. If you can convince Xian, then there's no problem. Forget it, let's not talk about that disgusting guy. First, you have to give me the data of Juzi sword. Let me say this first. Don't give me a character setting with hundreds or thousands of words as data. That stuff can be used in novels, but not in the game. You need at least a video file of a few dozen gigabytes. I don't have a video file of a few dozen gigabytes. Let me ask you, the real Juzi sword is here. Is that okay? Gohan asked calmly. Of course it's not a problem for the real Juzi sword. Just put on the helmet or use your divine sense to connect with her divine sense. Wait, what did you say? Has Juzi sword been born? Tomono's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Could it be that you've already synchronized the Juzi sword in reality? Yes, she's right beside me. Gohan nodded, admitting this. F***ck, Gohan, just what did you do? It hasn't even been 3 months, and you've gone from a piece of trash with only 9 quarks of sword essence to a famed sword-tier swordsman. Don't tell me you're the main character of this world? The main character of the world? What does that mean? Gohan was puzzled. It's very simple, it's the leader of the future world. Of course, ordinary Jiandi can't be the main character of the world. Only swordsmen like Kanzu and I Ching can be the main characters of the world. At this point, Tomono Kakaze looked at him in a daze. Suddenly, she looked like an infatuated girl. Maybe my choice was not wrong. You can really help me escape. What did you say? Oh, nothing much. Tomono Kakaze shook her head. I now understand why I Ching didn't record the Juzi sword's data into the game. If I'm not wrong, this should be the first time the Juzi sword has been synchronized. It has never appeared in the world before, so naturally, it's impossible for it to leave any data in the world. Naturally, I Ching couldn't have recorded the data in advance. But she should know that one day in the future, you, Gohan, will bring the synchronized Juzi sword into the game. This way, the data will come in by itself. She doesn't need to input it in advance. Gohan, log off first and bring the Juzi sword into the game. I'll create the Juzi sword's data on the other side at the same time. Tamono Kakaze suddenly said quickly. Didn't you say that Xian's permission is needed to write the data into the core database? Gohan asked curiously. I want to confirm my guess. If this is really I Ching's plan, then when I write the data, there will naturally be a backdoor prepared to help me hide from Xian's eyes. Tamono Kakaze snickered. It seemed like hiding from Xian was a very happy thing. Gu Xianyuan woke up from the game and opened her eyes to look for the Juzi sword. She found that Juzi, who was always by her side, was suddenly not by her side. She looked up and found Juzi sitting in front of Lu Yin's computer. Lu Yin himself was nowhere to be found. Juzi, come here for a moment. Gohan called Juzi's name. If it was in the past, the Juzi sword would definitely return to Gu Xuanyuan's side at the fastest speed. But this time, the Juzi sword didn't. It only appeared next to Gu Xianyuan after the sound of things colliding. Although she felt a little strange, Gu Xianyuan didn't have time to care about these things. She stretched out her hand that could barely be lifted and held the Juzi sword's arm. She shouted, "Return sword." The Juzi sword turned back to its pitch-black form and was held in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. There were two ways for a sword lady to connect to the game. The simplest way was to wear a sword lady's special helmet in the form of a sword lady. The second way was to connect to Gohan's divine sense through the sword mark. But now Gohan didn't have a sword lady's special game helmet on his hand. He could only rely on divine sense to connect to the sword mark. At this time, because of the medicinal effect, Gohan's divine sense still couldn't enter his Zifu. Once his divine sense couldn't enter his Zifu, it was impossible to connect to the Juzi sword's sword mark. In desperation, Gohan could only use a stupid method. Gohan's wrist moved slightly. He pointed the tip of the sword at his Zifu and then closed his eyes. He pierced the body of the Juzi sword into his Zifu. When the sword entered the body, it was reasonable to say that blood should flow non-stop. But Gohan's wound didn't have a drop of blood. In fact, this was the same as the deep sword mark. A sword lady couldn't hurt her sword wielder. However, this pain couldn't be avoided. It was even more painful than bleeding. This was because this pain directly acted on the Zifu. Fortunately, the moment the Juzi sword pierced into Gohan's divine sense, a gap was finally torn open. Gohan's divine sense finally entered his Zifu. Once again, he saw the sword mark that he hadn't seen for a long time. At this moment, whether it was Qing Pin and Gu Yun who were looking for Gohan on the street or Yi Tian who was being repaired by the blacksmith, they all clearly felt Gohan's aura and location. Just as they were about to run to that location, this feeling suddenly disappeared without a trace. How is it? When Gohan logged into the game again, he saw the NPC that was possessed by Tamono Kakaze looking at him with a stiff expression. Gohan knew that he had asked for nothing. Tamono Kakaze had already left the NPC's body. Please wait patiently. Your question is being processed by the highest level AI. The NPC replied dryly. Gohan could only wait. This ended up waiting for half an hour. When there were less than 10 minutes left before the challenge began, the NPC was once again possessed by Tamono Kakaze. As expected, everything is within I Ching's calculations. Xian is still foolishly fishing. He didn't find anything. Tamono Kakaze said excitedly to Gohan as soon as she appeared. So it's a success? Of course. I personally helped you write the data. Of course there won't be a problem. But I Ching is a little too good to you. He actually prepared such an abnormal sword lady for you. My God, the 3-foot sword has an opponent now. Tamono Kakaze praised. Alright, there's nothing else for me to do. I'll leave the rest to the NPC. After finishing, Tamono Kakaze left again. At the same time, the NPC spoke. The anomaly has been resolved. The sword lady corresponding to the token has been found. Player Commander, please take note. When the synchronization is successful, your 10 tokens will disappear. If the synchronization fails, you will lose one of your tokens, and you will never be able to conduct synchronization experiments with the heavenly sword again. Are you sure you want to proceed with synchronization? I am sure. Understood. Please keep your token well. The Juzi sword is staying in room 1845 on the 11th floor of the sword tower. You can take elevator number 29 to the 11th floor. Once you find room 1845, use the token to enter the room. The Juzi sword is sleeping in the room. Guhan walked straight to elevator number 29 and went up to the 11th floor. The other floors on the 11th floor were quiet because the number of sword ladies on this floor was actually the lowest. Guhan found room 1845. He took out his token and scanned it on the scanner on the door. The red light instantly turned green. With a click, the door of room 1845 was unlocked. Inside the room, the Juzi sword was lying quietly on the bed, waiting for Guhan to wake it up. Guhan thought there was no need to go through so much trouble. The Juzi sword was already awake. Logically speaking, after Guhan entered the room, the Juzi sword should have woken up within a few minutes. It would wait for Guhan to come into contact with it and synchronize with him. However, 5 minutes had passed, and the Juzi sword did not move at all. Could it be that it was also pretending to be asleep like the heavenly sword? Guhan walked straight to the Juzi sword's side and said in a commanding tone, "Get up and open your eyes." With a whoosh, the Juzi sword opened its eyes. When it saw Guhan's appearance, it suddenly put on a defensive posture. It looked like if Guhan dared to take a step closer, it would fight with Guhan. What the hell? Back then, he had fought with the heavenly sword in this room. Was he going to repeat the same routine now? Who are you? Why are you here? Where is my master? The Juzi sword asked in a panic. Only then did Guhan understand that the Juzi sword was wary of him because he looked different from Gu Xianyuan, who was lying on the bed. Gu Xianyuan was a beautiful girl, and he was just an ugly man with a scar on his face. It was only natural that the Juzi sword would be wary of him. Guhan smiled. He ignored the extremely vigilant Juzi sword and directly grabbed the blade of the Juzi sword with one hand. When Guhan's skin was cut by the blade and blood soaked the Juzi sword's blade, Juzi finally understood that the Guhan in front of her was her master in reality. "Master, please forgive Juzi's rudeness." Juzi immediately knelt in front of Guhan and complained in a voice that Guhan could faintly hear, "You are so ugly now. How can I recognize you?" Chapter 629. Compared to the previous challenge competitions, the number of players paying attention to the 8-city sword among cities challenge had risen from 75% to 85%, an increase of 10%. This was the highest number of players paying attention to the 8-city sword among cities challenge competition, and the number of players paying attention to the 8-city sword among cities challenge competition had increased by 2%. Once again, the 8-city sword among cities challenge competition had created a record that only commanders could achieve. There was another reason why it could break the historical record. Before the competition, a piece of news had spread like wildfire. That was, the odds of Guhan defeating the number 1 person in spirit sword level had suddenly dropped from 140,000 to 399. What did this mean? It meant that a guy who was not afraid of death had spent a lot of money to bet that the military governor could defeat the number 1 person in spirit sword level, which directly lowered the odds of this option to 390 times. Later, there was a nouveau riche and mathematical god who had bet 100,000 renminbi on the option that Guhan could defeat the number 1 person in spirit sword level. After finding out that the odds had been reduced to 389.5, he wrote a very complicated formula. In the end, it was determined that the betting amount was around 60 to 80 million renminbi. If this person could win the bet, he would get about 24 billion renminbi, which was almost an astronomical figure. this news swept through the entire forum like a whirlwind. Everyone was discussing this matter. The goal of their discussion was who the nouveau riche was and whether he had broken his head. In the end, it slowly changed to whether the military governor could defeat the number one person in spirit sword level. In the beginning, naturally, no one believed that the military governor could defeat the number one person in spirit sword level, because this was simply impossible. That year, Gu Jinzheng couldn't even defeat the last person in spirit sword level, let alone the number one person in spirit sword level. However, this nouveau riche actually dared to spend so much money on this option. Did he receive some inside information? Could it be that the strength of the military governor was really that strong? Well, although most people felt that this was nonsense and impossible, some people's brains suddenly went haywire. They felt that it was better to take a gamble than the odds of a few tenths. If they won, they would earn more than 300 times the income. As a result, after this news spread, the odds of Gohan being able to get first place in the Spirit Sword tier competition slowly decreased again, and finally reduced to 1/231. This meant that at least 40 million renminbi had been spent on this option. This made Gohan, who was sitting in the players' preparation room, not know whether to laugh or cry. In the blink of an eye, his odds had decreased by more than 100. What a huge loss! However, when he thought about the attributes of the Juzi sword, Gohan's eyes flashed with an unfathomable light. Then, he opened the lottery interface again and fiddled with it. The first challenge was for the number one person in Ancient Sword level. This Ancient Sword level player with the Yixian sword stood happily on the arena with the host. After some boring pleasantries, they finally entered the main topic of the challenge. The host smiled and asked Wei Ying, the number one sword-wielding player in Ancient Sword level, "Hello Wei Ying, how many quarks of sword element oral solution would you like to put into the bet?" The 1,000 quarks of sword element oral solution in Wei Ying's hand had been divided into 5 bottles containing 200 quarks of sword element oral solution. If Wei Ying put in 100 quarks of sword element oral solution, then his opponent would be a player in Treasure Sword level, who also received 100 quarks of sword element oral solution as a reward. According to the different rewards, the reward for the Treasure Sword level players, who were eliminated in the first round of the semifinals, was 100 quarks of sword element oral solution. If Wei Ying put in all 1,000 quarks of sword element oral solution, then he would directly fight against the top 64 Treasure Sword level players, because the reward they received was 1,000 quarks of sword element oral solution. Without a doubt, the less sword element oral solution Wei Ying used, the higher his chances of winning. However, there was another rule in the challenge tournament, and that was that there were only 3 chances to challenge someone at each level. The sword element oral solution Wei Ying used for the second challenge would be the accumulated reward from the previous challenge. What did this mean? For example, if Wei Ying put in 100 quarks of sword element for the first time and won the first round, then Wei Ying could only challenge a Treasure Sword level player, who received 200 quarks of sword element oral solution as a reward. The third challenge would be against a player who put in 400 quarks of sword element oral solution. After the 3 times, Wei Ying's challenge would also end, because he only had 3 chances in each group. If he could not defeat the first player in the group, which was the military governor, then he could not challenge the players in the famed sword group. Even if Wei Ying won all the challenges, he would at most receive 800 quarks of sword element oral solution as a reward. 100 quarks of sword element oral solution was Wei Ying's capital, so the actual reward was not much. To put it simply, the more sword element he put in the first bet, the higher the possibility of winning more rewards. But at the same time, the more he put in, the stronger the opponent Wei Ying would face. This also reflected the challenger's confidence. If the challenger's first investment was too small, only 100 quarks, then there was no doubt that he had the least confidence in this game, and the audience would look down on him the most. But at the same time, if he directly threw in all 1,000 corks, the audience would think that this guy was too arrogant. Every time the challenge came to this point, it was always the time when the challenger hesitated. Similarly, all the audience was very curious about the number 1 ancient sword level player, to see how big his mind was. "I'll put in this much." After hesitating for a minute, Wei Ying finally made up his mind. He took out 5 out of the 10 bottles of sword element oral solution and put them in the hands of the host. "Oh, 500 corks of sword element oral solution. Then your first opponent will be in the top 256 of the semifinals. The second round will be the top 64. The third round will be against one of the top 16. The host quickly calculated all of Wei Ying's opponents for the third round. Immediately, the audience cheered in unison. This number 1 ancient sword level player was quite brave. He actually dared to compete with a top 16 sword level player. Among all the ancient sword rank number 1s in history, this could be considered the most courageous. However, the host did not seem to want to let Wei Ying go just like that. He bumped Wei Ying's shoulder and asked teasingly, "Wei Ying, why don't you just put in 700 corks of sword element? That way, you'll be able to compete with Mr. Military Governor. When I become a sword-level sword wielder, I'll naturally challenge Mr. Military Governor. But for now, I definitely can't beat Mr. Military Governor." Wei Ying chuckled. Only an idiot would compete with a freak like the Military Governor. His sword element oral solution was not easy to come by, and he could not let it go to waste. "Mr. Wei Ying, you're really honest. Then, please look at the big screen. Who will Mr. Wei Ying's first opponent be?" The host waved his hand, and a completely sealed lottery box appeared in front of Wei Ying. It contained the player ranked 129th in the sword level. Since only the top 8 had to go through extra rounds to determine their actual rankings, the players were ranked 9th, 17th, 33rd, 65th, 129th, 257th, and 513th before the top 8. Wei Ying would have to challenge all the players ranked 129th. Finally, after fumbling around for a while, Wei Ying pulled out a piece of paper with a number on it. Contestant number 584-75624. He wants us to contact this player now and see if he's willing to fight Mr. Wei Ying. Although Wei Ying was willing to fight, the player who was picked might not necessarily be willing. Therefore, this required the other party's approval. If the other party did not agree, then they would have to draw again. A few seconds later, this lucky player's communication was connected. "Hello, Mr. Player, I'm the host of the challenge. I know, I'm watching the live broadcast." Before the host could explain, he was interrupted by the other player. The player continued, "I'm telling you, I don't want to be challenged. Don't ask me." After saying that, the call was hung up. This was a very normal thing to do. They had watched the first ancient sword level competition and had a general estimate of the strength of both sides. Those who were not confident would not dare to accept the other party's challenge. 500 corks of sword essence would take at least 10 days to half a month. It would be a waste to waste it like this. Therefore, after Wei Ying was rejected 3 times in one go, the 4th player who was picked was finally willing to fight Wei Ying. Since this player dared to accept the challenge of the number 1 ancient sword level player, he naturally had some skill. His swordmistress was ranked 18th in the swordmistress record, the gentleman's sword. It was also an extremely powerful swordmistress. Unfortunately, his opponent in the top 256 had met the good people of the land of fantasy. Naturally, the second place of the swordmistress group could only be defeated. In terms of real strength, this player might even have the strength to enter the top 64. Because of his hatred and the fact that he was provoked by an ancient sword level player, this player did not hesitate when he attacked. He did not have the slightest thought of taking care of a child. Although the graceful celestial sword was quite durable, and could still summon 6 long-range support firepower, Wei Ying was in an absolute struggle against the gentleman's sword that was going all out. However, one had to admit that Wei Ying's strength was quite impressive. After 20 minutes of fierce battle and various outstanding strategies, he finally seized an opportunity and used the graceful celestial sword's revolutionary spirit to grind the gentleman's sword to death. However, after the gentleman's sword's personal armor shield was broken, the graceful celestial sword's personal armor shield was only left with less than 3%, and it was almost defeated by the opponent. After pocketing the reward of 10 bottles of 1,000 quarks, the host once again appeared beside the exhausted Wei Ying and temptingly encouraged Wei Ying to carry on with the next battle. However, after realizing that even the 129th place player could almost defeat him, Wei Ying did not have the courage to continue challenging the 33rd place player. He decisively bowed to the host to thank him and left the stage. Such cowardly behavior caused the audience to hiss in unison. "Dear audience, please take care of your throats, because our military governor is about to begin his journey of challenge," the host said excitedly. The audience immediately let out a tsunami of cheers. Chapter 630. Qingpin, are you sure this is the place? Qing Jian and Gu Yun, these 2 adorable girls, never would they have thought that after just a day, the 2 of them would actually come to this Toad Street again. According to Qing Jian and Gu Yun's perception in that instant, Gu Han's position was right here. What did I say? I didn't sense it wrong last time, right? It's this street. Qingpin put his hands on his waist and said valiantly. Gu Yun, who was behind him, couldn't help but roll her eyes. However, what Qingpin said was right. The perception at that moment just now fell on Toad Street. Qingpin, we didn't search clearly last night, and we didn't check many people's houses. This time, we can't let go of any details. We have to check all the houses. I always feel that Gohan is hiding in one of the houses. Women's intuition was very accurate. Then let's start from this building. By the way, why does Qingpin feel that this house is very familiar? Qingpin pointed to a building beside him and said. Gu Yun immediately knocked on Qingpin's head when she heard it. What kind of memory do you have? Isn't this the building where you fell and smashed Lu Anasili last night? I said that it has nothing to do with Qingpin. Qingpin is very light like a balloon. Qingpin retaliated by pinching Gu Yun's arm hard. Alright then, let's start from this building. However, let's forget about the room on the 2nd floor. We've already seen it. Gu Yun exhorted the poor man. The poor wouldn't be so stupid. Search the place that you've already searched. There are only 3 women and a brat there. The solid cold isn't there. Alright, I was praising the intuition of these 2 cute little fellows just now, but now it seems like I was praising them for nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A total of 5 bottles of sword element oral solution of 1,000 quarks. Mr. Military Governor, how many bottles are you going to bet? The supporter asked Gohan curiously. From the number of quarks that Gohan decided to bet, it could be seen how ambitious the military governor was. If he only bet 3/5, which was 3,000 quarks, like what Wei Ying did just now, it meant that the military governor was not confident that he could defeat the famous swords group. At most, he would be an opponent in the top 16. The reward for the champion of the famous swords group was 20,000 quarks of sword element oral solution. If Gohan wanted to fight the champion, he would have to bet all of his sword element, a total of 5,000 quarks of sword element. This was a desperate decision. If Gohan lost, all his rewards would be gone. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the military governor's hand. They wanted to see how many bottles of sword element oral solution he was going to bet. This was not just a matter of honor. It was also related to the stakes of these people. After all, most of the players were betting that Gohan could defeat the champion of the famous swords group. If Gohan did not take out 5 bottles of sword element oral solution, it would be game over for them. Even if Gohan won all 3 battles, it would still be game over for them. Under everyone's gaze, the military governor smiled. He was ready to hand the bottle in his hand to the host and make his choice. Wait! The host suddenly pressed down on Gohan's hand and said with a smile, "Don't be in a hurry to tell me the answer. Here, I want to announce a statistic to the audience. According to our statistical data, in the past 19 sword-level challenges, there has only been one champion who has chosen to bet 1,000 quarks on a bottle of wine. There were 3 champions who chose 2 bottles, 6 players who chose 3 bottles, and 7 players who chose 4 bottles. As for those who chose 5 bottles, there were only 2 players who chose to bet everything on 5 bottles. Coincidentally, one of the 2 players who chose 5 bottles failed to challenge the champion of the famous swords group. He then mysteriously disappeared from the game and never appeared in this world again. No one knows what happened to him in real life. As for the other player, he finally defeated the champion of the famous swords group and became the Supreme King Jiandi, our dear Gu Jin Jiandi. The audience immediately cheered when they heard the name Gu Jin Jiandi. The legend of Gu Jin Jiandi was too legendary. It was every gamer's dream. Everyone dreamed of having a king like Gu Jin Jiandi. Every time Sword Emperor Yen Jin's name was mentioned, the players would involuntarily let out the loudest cheers. "Mr. Admiral, do you know why I'm telling you this?" the host asked Gohan solemnly, shaking the burden in his heart. "What you're trying to tell me is that if I choose to drink 5 bottles and defeat the number 1 famed swordsman, then I might be like Sword Emperor Yen Jin back in the day, achieving supreme success in both the game and the real world, right?" The commander looked at the host with a paralyzed expression. "That's right, that's exactly what I mean." The host bowed gracefully and extended his hand in front of Gohan. "Mr. Military Governor, please tell me your answer. How many bottles do you intend to give me?" 5 bottles! 5 bottles! 5 bottles! Suddenly, a deafening roar came from all around. Almost all the spectators in the stands stood up and waved their arms crazily, repeatedly and uniformly shouting this number. Oh, by the way, in order to enhance the feeling of being in the arena, the gamers could choose to watch the match from the first-person perspective in a small room. They could also choose to sit on the spectator stands around the arena and use a more realistic method to transmit their cheers and shouts to the ears of the contestants. Then, what kind of scene did Gohan feel at this moment? He was standing in the middle of the crowd, and tens of thousands of people were cheering for him. Anyone in such a position would feel their blood boiling. In other words, Gohan was no longer fighting alone. He was carrying the cheers of the audience on his back. "Thank you, everyone." Gohan raised his hand and gestured for everyone to be quiet. The noisy venue, which had been more than 200 decibels, instantly quieted down. Not a single sound could be heard. It was as if all the previous sounds were illusions, and no one was there in the first place. "Here you go." Under everyone's gaze, Gohan placed all 5 bottles in his hands into the hands of the host. Hooray! The crowd cheered, and the entire arena instantly turned into a sea of joy. Everyone suddenly had a feeling that they were watching the rise of a great person. This person was not only the protagonist of this arena, but also the protagonist of the entire game. If he won, then he might very well become the protagonist of this world. "Please choose your opponent." The host handed the lottery box with the list of opponents to Gohan. According to Gohan's bet, Gohan's first opponent would be the top 128 opponents of the famed swordsman group. This was because the reward they received was 5,000 quarks of sword essence oral solution. According to the rules of the bet, Gohan's opponent would be between the 64th and 128th place. In other words, it would be all the opponents in the 65th place on the ranking list. Number 384895757. This was the number of the first opponent Gohan drew. Soon, the host connected to the communication of this famed swordsman. "Hello, Mr. Gamer. Are you watching the live broadcast of our Challenger League?" the host asked. Yes. On the other end of the communication, the answer was short and powerful. However, this voice had been edited. One could only tell that it was a girl's voice. As for the specific voice, it was unknown. The reason for this was to protect the privacy of the players. If the players chose to reject the challenge, it would undoubtedly be very embarrassing. Those who were familiar with the players would be able to discover the identity of the players based on their voices. If the news spread, it would have a negative impact on the players. Therefore, every player's voice had been edited. In that case, I don't think I need to waste time explaining the current situation. May I ask if you are willing to represent the top 128 players of the famed Swordsman group and fight against the swordsman player from the Treasured Swords group, Mr. Military Governor? The host was prepared to be rejected. After all, the military governor was very famous. Most people believed that the military governor could defeat the number one opponent of the famed Swordsman group. The other party was afraid that his sword essence oral solution would be won, so it was very normal for him to choose to reject the challenge. "I'm willing. It's my wish to fight the military governor." Unexpectedly, the girl on the other end of the communication agreed so quickly. Even the host did not have time to react. However, he quickly cheered in a high voice, "Thank you, adorable swordsman. We will definitely be able to watch an exciting battle. Player, you now have 1 minute. You can teleport anything that belongs to you in front of you and complete your pre-battle preparations. After 1 minute, you will be teleported to the arena. Do you understand?" Understood. The other party hung up and entered a 1-minute state of preparation. Then, dear audience members, who is our Mr. Military Governor's first opponent? Let us count down to 10 and welcome Mr. Military Governor's powerful opponent. Will the dignity of the famed Swords group be protected, or will the Military Governor pierce through the entire famed Swords group? Let us wait and see. 10, 9, 3, 2, 1. As the countdown ended, a portal suddenly appeared in the arena. A tall and voluptuous beauty in a tight outfit stepped out of the portal. Bright Moon. Gohan was shocked when he saw who it was. Gohan's first opponent of the famed Swords group was none other than Gohan's good friend, the first famed sword-level swordsman he met in the game, Bright Moon of yesteryear. "I've been wanting to fight you for a long time." Bright Moon of yesteryear flicked her hair and looked at Gohan. "Yes, from now on, we are not friends, but opponents." Chapter 631. He did not expect Gohan's first opponent to be Bright Moon. He did not expect this careless girl to be able to make it to the top 120 of the famed sword-level players. She was one of the top 128 famed sword-level players. Gohan could not help but sigh. Ladies and gentlemen, from the looks of it, Mr. Admiral and the one being challenged are actually friends. This is really too interesting. The host placed the microphone next to Gohan's mouth. "Mr. Military Governor, may I ask if this beautiful sword wielder is your friend?" Gohan looked at Bright Moon. Bright Moon nodded. Gohan then replied, "That's right. This is my good friend. We have fought together before." "Then may I ask this beautiful lady, is what Mr. Military Governor said true? May I ask what your in-game name is?" The host asked Bright Moon. "That's right. My name is Bright Moon of the past. I'm a good friend of the Admiral. I've wanted to compete with the Admiral for a long time, but I've never had the chance. I didn't think I'd be so lucky to meet you at such an important occasion. Oh, since you are a good friend of the Military Governor, I have a very important question to ask you. Will you hold back because of your friendship with the Military Governor?" It seems like everyone has bought lottery tickets for the Challenger League. This is a very important matter. Although the host's words seemed to be very unintentional, a portion of the audience became nervous. They had all bet on the Admiral not advancing to the top 64. If it was because Mingyu had gone easy on him, then wouldn't they have lost very unjustly? Suddenly, everyone stared at Bright Moon, waiting for her answer. There were already people posting on the forum, asking for a different opponent for the military governor. However, there were very few people who did this. However, most players would rather Bright Moon go easy on him. They had bet on the military governor advancing to a higher level. They could not wait for Bright Moon to go easy on him. Absolutely not. Back then, Bright Moon said resolutely, "I will definitely use all of my strength to fight against the military governor. This is how I respect my good friend." Sigh, Miss Mingyue, although I agree with what you said, as half a judge, I have to ask you one more thing. Why should I believe you just because of what you said? The host continued to ask. If my words can't be relied on, then what about the reputation of Yaoguang's sword sect? Mingyu clenches her teeth and says, I am Yaoguang's biological sister. Even if I let a drop of water slip, it would be a disgrace to Yaoguang's sword sect. From now on, our Yaoguang sword faction will no longer be a sword faction. Is that alright? Just kidding. Just kidding. There's no need to get so worked up. The host wiped the sweat off his forehead. As there was no rule that the challenged should be replaced just because the challenged was a friend of the challenger, the host had no choice but to allow the match to continue since Bright Moon herself did not agree to it. In the end, the host asked Bright Moon for the reward of 5,000 quarks of sword essence oral solution. The match had officially begun. Sunset Sword, come out. Back then, Bright Moon was probably the person who understood Gohan the most in the game and was not Gohan's friend in real life. She knew Gohan's real name, and that the temporary commander who led Yuzhong City to victory was Gohan. Therefore, she was the one who was most guarded against Gohan. Once Sunset Sword was released, she went into a defensive stance and stared at Gohan's every move. She did not dare to slack off for even a minute. However, after waiting for almost a minute, Gohan still did not make a move. This made Bright Moon of that year a little angry, and she said, Admiral, are you looking down on me, Bright Moon of that year? You shouldn't have agreed to my challenge. Gohan smiled bitterly. You know my strength. You will lose and I will win. Why waste those 5,000 quarks of sword essence? Commander, you're underestimating me too much. Could it be that I, Bright Moon, would care about those 5,000 quarks of sword essence? Bright Moon said sternly. Military Governor, you've never really fought with me. If you think I'm your friend, then show me your true strength and fight me. Otherwise, you don't deserve to be my friend. I understand. I've underestimated you. Military Governor nodded. Since you're my friend, I'll fight you with all my strength. Only then will I be worthy of being called a friend. After saying that, Gohan took out a longsword from his dimensional pocket. As soon as the sword appeared, the audience was instantly in an uproar. F***ck How did this sword come out of a dimensional pocket? I remember the military governor already had 2 scabbards on him. A player asked in confusion. Idiot. This means that this is the military governor's 3rd sword mistress. Moreover, this sword's appearance is different from the heavenly sword and the Chinpin sword. This is a brand new sword mistress. This is a famed sword mistress. When did the military governor become a famed sword mistress? A player jumped up from his chair in shock. Wait a minute. Why does this sword mistress look so familiar? I feel like I've seen it somewhere before, but I can't remember. Another player said. In an instant, the entire forum was abuzz with discussion. Everyone was discussing how the military governor had suddenly become a famed sword mistress. He was clearly a treasured sword mistress yesterday. The host was also dumbfounded. He immediately contacted the game officials and received a reply from them. Dear players, according to the official's confirmation, Mr. Military Governor completed the synchronization this morning and became a famed sword mistress. His actions are completely in line with the rules of the challenge tournament. As for the specifics, the officials are still researching it. Players, please wait a moment. The challenge tournament will be temporarily suspended until the officials' final decision is made. After the host hurriedly said that, the competition was temporarily suspended. After posing for a minute, Bright Moon of that year could only helplessly walk to the side of the military governor and sit down. She grumbled in dissatisfaction, B*****. You're such a B*****. Why do you have to come up with all sorts of tricks when it comes to you? It's all your fault. You told me to show my true strength. Otherwise, I would be looking down on you. So, I had no choice but to take out the Yu King Gojian sword. I didn't plan to use it in a famed sword mistress battle. I just knew this would happen, Gohan said with a bitter smile. Strange. Why do I feel like you've changed a lot? In the past, you would never say so many words in a single sentence, and you would never speak to me in such a joking tone. Why do I feel like you're not the military governor of the past? Bright Moon of that year's intuition was terrifying. She could sense that Gohan was different from before with just one sentence. I've changed. Too many things have happened during this period of time, and people have changed along with it. I think this is quite good. Gohan smiled. I think it's good too. You've become more human. Bright Moon of that year suddenly lowered her head and hesitated for a moment. I suddenly remembered something. I remember hearing Steel Centipede say that you were with the Yu King Gojian sword in the King Arthur's Betrayal Instance dungeon. I think you even summoned the Yu King Gojian sword. You should have been a famed sword mistress. Why did you participate in the competition from the Treasured Swords group? Gohan's body stiffened. He suddenly realized that he had made a huge mistake. Back then, in the King Arthur's Betrayal dungeon, he had used the King of Yu's Gojian sword as his weapon because he was poor. It seemed like he had even allowed the King of Yu's sword Maiden body to appear. These were all seen by his teammates who had fought with him. However, because of the battle in Yuzhong City, Gohan had become a lot more busy. In addition, he was still a treasured swordsman when he registered, so he was naturally assigned to the Treasured Swords group. He had completely forgotten that the Yu King Gojian sword had appeared in front of Steel Centipede and the others. If this matter were to spread, how would he explain the Yu King Gojian sword? For a moment Gohan fell into deep thought. When Bright Moon saw that Gohan was silent again, she could only pout her lips to express her dissatisfaction. At the same time, there was a storm on the forum. The players were divided into two factions. One faction supported the military governor. They believed that the military governor's actions were within the rules. It was just that there were some loopholes in his method. They couldn't deny the military governor just like that. They should let the military governor fight normally. The other faction believed that the military governor was cheating. Since ancient times, the previous 19 champions of the Treasured Swords group had used sword ladies to complete the challenge. The military governor had used a famed sword lady. This was cheating. This was a battle between famed swordsmen. How could this be considered a challenge? How could it be fair? Even if the military governor used a sword lady to win first place in the famed swords group, he was still worlds apart from Gu Jinjiendi. Moreover, from this point of view, the military governor's character had a very serious problem. He was a scum and should be severely punished. They suggested that the officials strip the military governor of his right to participate and expel him from the competition. The two factions on the forum were arguing fiercely. At the same time, in the game management office, the 4 core special grade game planners were also arguing fiercely over this matter. These 4 special grade game planners were the most important people in the game apart from Tomono Kakashi. They decided major events in the game, such as this year's new instance Dungeon Tree Collection. However, they usually didn't deal with these small issues. However, because of the heated argument on the forum, the players would riot if they made a wrong decision. The 4 special grade game planners had no choice but to gather together to discuss a final decision. However, unexpectedly, these 4 special grade planners actually started arguing, just like on the forum. 2 of the special grade game planners felt that the rules were as such. At most, they could amend the rules in the future. However, they had to abide by the rules now. Otherwise, the fairness of the game would be gone. The other 2 special class planners believed that it was precisely because there was no fairness to speak of that they had to pull out this unfair thing. However, they didn't say that they wanted to strip the military governor of his right to participate in the competition. Instead, they wanted the military governor to give up on using the famed sword lady. That way, the competition could return to normal. The 2 sides argued for more than 10 rounds, but they couldn't convince the other side. In the end, they had no choice but to use their ultimate method and ask the 5th person to make the final decision. This 5th person was naturally the person with the highest authority in the game, Tomono Kakaze. Chapter 632. Who else knows about this? Gohan snapped out of his thoughts and turned to Bright Moon. Probably only the people from our Yaoguang sword faction know about this. I just asked them, and they all said that they've never mentioned this to anyone else. They also promised that they would keep it to themselves and not tell anyone else. Bright Moon had secretly contacted Steel Centipede and the others while Gohan was deep in thought, and specifically told them about the Yuwang Jian. Thank everyone for me. I'll return this favor in the future, Gohan said, cupping his fist. Alright, don't be so formal. Our Yaoguang sword faction naturally doesn't need to worry, but there's one person we can't control. Bright Moon said, pouting. As for who the person she was talking about was, Gohan was well aware of it. Aside from the traitor of the Yaoguang sword faction and the second-in-command of the Yaoguang sword faction, who else could make Bright Moon so unhappy? He probably won't betray me. Gohan forwarded a mail to Bright Moon of Yesteryear's personal terminal. When Bright Moon of Yesteryear opened the mail, she realized that it was sent by Wondrous Brushrider. The content was very simple. There was only one sentence: I won't tell anyone about Yuwang Jian. His promise should still be valid. Although she disliked the Wondrous Brush Scholar, Mingyu had no choice but to admit that the Wondrous Brush Scholar's character was excellent. He's just reminding me that he has something on me. Gohan sneered. It's fine. I already have an idea on this matter. Please tell Steel Centipede and the others that I thank them for this. If they don't say it, I'll remember their kindness. If they say it, it's fine too. I already have an appropriate solution. TCH, you still don't believe Steel Centipede and the others? Bright Moon stood up. You can tell Steel Centipede and the others yourself. Look, the host has already come out. The officials probably already have a way to deal with this. Dear players, after the discussion of our official special planners, the results are as follows. The host coughed, his face a little stiff. After looking through the information again, the Admiral's entire process did not violate any rules. Therefore, it is hereby decided that the competition will continue. Admiral can also continue to use the famed sword-grade sword Maiden to continue fighting. Everything will return to normal, and the competition will restart in 1 minute. Shady. Trash. Bastard. The audience was in an uproar, and all kinds of insults and curses could be heard. Most of these players were players who had bet on the Admiral not being able to defeat the champion of the famed sword group. Now that the Admiral had the Yu King Go Jian sword in hand and was a famed sword-level swordsman, wouldn't it be easy for him to become the champion of the famed sword group? They might as well bang their heads against the wall and kill themselves. How could they not be angry when they had lost all their money in vain? How could they not be angry? Even the players who bet that Gohan could defeat the champion of the famed Sword Mistress group were livid. This was because if Military Governor had the famed Sword Mistress, Defeating a spiritual sword mistress wouldn't be impossible. When that time came, they would lose. Seeing the angry players around him and the host sweating profusely, not knowing what to say, Gohan knew that things couldn't go on like this. Otherwise, even if he achieved his goal, his reputation would be ruined. He would turn from the beloved military governor to the hated military governor. Although Gohan didn't mind his reputation being ruined, once it was ruined, many things would be difficult to do. Therefore, Gohan couldn't just sit back and watch things develop like this. Therefore, Gohan walked to the side of the host and asked calmly, "I would like to borrow your microphone to say a few words to everyone. Is that okay?" The host also wanted to get out of this painful situation. Now that Gohan had stepped forward, it could ease his embarrassment. Therefore, after consulting the officials who were watching the whole process, he decisively handed the microphone to the military governor. "Everyone, don't scold me first. Can you listen to me before you scold me?" Gohan's voice spread through the microphone. Now that the military governor had a lot of prestige, everyone instantly shut their mouths and looked at the military governor to see what he wanted to say. "I know that everyone thinks that it's unfair for me to use the famed sword mistress to fight. In fact, I don't want to do this, but there are some things that I can't control, so I won't defend myself. Just now, this host told me that the officials have agreed to let me continue using the famed sword mistress to fight the next famed sword mistress. I'm very grateful to the officials for their understanding. I deeply respect their strict adherence to the rules. It's because of this attitude that our game can continue to develop healthily. I'd like to thank all the game developers here. Your decisions have left me in awe." Gohan's words made the officials happy. At least, the 4 special class planners who were anxious because of Gohan and trembling with anger after reading all kinds of cursing comments on the forum felt much better. Their resentment towards Gohan wasn't as big as before. Of course, I also know what everyone is thinking. Everyone has invested their limited wealth into the welfare lottery. If I made a mistake and caused a loss because of me, then that is indeed my mistake. Actually, the Yu King Gojin sword was in my hands a long time ago. It was a reward given to me after I cleared the Yu King Gojin sword instance dungeon as an SSS rank. Previously, because my sword element didn't reach the full 10,000 quarks, I took it to participate in the King Arthur's Betrayal instance dungeon. My teammates actually mistook me for a famed sword mistress. They only found out the truth just now. I've let them down. After that, I didn't touch the Yu King Gojin sword instance dungeon until this morning, when the competition ended. Then, I suddenly became a famed sword mistress. Gohan's words explained why he had become a famed sword mistress. He also explained the King Arthur's Betrayal instance dungeon. Even if Wonderpen Scholar brought this matter up in the future, Gohan could deny it completely. After all, Gohan was only holding the Yu King Gojin sword in his hands. Whether or not it was synchronized, they could not provide evidence. Of course, it was not completely without evidence. For example, in the Yaoguang sword sex database, there must still be video data from that time. If they carefully analyzed the video data, they might be able to find some clues. However, these were just clues and not actual evidence. Gohan was not afraid of them. Moreover, when the time came, Gohan might not even need the identity of the military governor. The military governor's explanation was reasonable. The audience discussed for a while and finally accepted the military governor's explanation. But accepting an explanation was one thing, and accepting the truth was another. Asking them to allow Gohan to bring a famed sword-grade sword lady to participate in the competition was something they would never agree to. Of course, Gohan had also thought of this, so he continued. "I know. Before me, the 19 seniors used sword mistresses of the treasure sword level to participate in the competition. Originally, I did not plan to take out the famed sword mistress. Minghua was a good friend of mine. Since I promised her that I would do my best, I will not go back on my word. That's why I took out my famed sword mistress. Guhan paused for a moment. He suddenly found the MC next to him and asked him through the microphone, "Mr. MC, among the past 19 challengers, how many quarks did the one with the least amount of sword element have?" The host was confused. How would he know who had the least amount of sword essence? He did not know, but the officials did. In less than 5 seconds, the data was sent to the host's personal terminal. It was Gu Jinjing. He won first place in the Treasure Sword group with 30,987 quarks of sword essence. Then, he challenged the famed sword mistresses. The host answered quickly, "I see. Then, I will also announce my own situation. I now have a total of 25,325 quarks of sword essence. That's 5,000 quarks less than Gu Jinjiendi. It seems like I will break the record for the fewest amount of sword essence in the Treasure Sword group." Guhan's words confused the players. What did the military governor mean? Did he boast too little about his sword essence? Everyone must be wondering why I'm telling you all this. It's very simple. If I don't use the famed sword Maiden, then I should be the weakest champion of the treasured swords category since ancient times. At this point, Guhan smiled. If I can promise everyone that other than this match with Miss Mingyue, I will not use the Surpassing King's sword in my other 2 famed sword tier challenges. I will only use my Poverty Sword and Heavenly Sword to fight. Furthermore, if I lose the second match, then the match between me and that year's Ming would also be considered a loss. Is everyone willing to accept my suggestion? Guhan's words were reasonable and convincing. Hearing Guhan's words, the other players nodded, expressing that this was indeed the most suitable solution. If Guhan didn't use the famed sword mistress, then it would be no different from the usual situation. At this time, the majority of the players had already secretly nodded. However, there were still a large number of players who felt that it was inappropriate. This military governor only said that he wouldn't use the famed sword mistress in the last 2 matches of the famed sword group, but Guhan could use the famed sword mistress in the spiritual sword group. In this case, it wasn't impossible for the military governor to break the record of the famed sword group and defeat the spiritual sword group. But very quickly, these people's worries were completely put to rest, because Guhan continued, "I've looked at the odds of the welfare lottery. Thank you everyone for your support. You all think that I can defeat the champion of the famed sword group. I understand everyone's thoughts, and for the sake of everyone's money, I, military governor, will also only use the famed sword mistress in the 3 matches against the spiritual sword group. Of course, everyone in the celestial sword group can't make things difficult for me anymore, provided that I can kill my way to the celestial sword group, haha." As military governor finished speaking, the entire venue was filled with thunderous applause. In the forum, all the disputes suddenly disappeared, and all turned into praises for the military governor. The human heart was really capricious and cute. Chapter 633. Match Start. The match is over. Before the audience, including Bright Moon of that year, could react to what had happened, the entire arena started to flash, signaling the end of the match. It was then that Bright Moon of that year realized that her personal shield had been shattered. According to the rules of the Challenger League, once a sword wielder's personal shield was shattered, no matter what state the sword lady was in, the sword wielder would be considered to have lost. What did you just do? Bright Moon of that year lifted her head and saw Guhan standing in front of her. He was sheathing her Go Jian sword. It's simple. I came to your side and shattered your personal shield, Guhan said seriously. Since I promised you that I would use my full strength, I will use my full strength. I am a man of my word. So, my true strength is only enough to last a few seconds in front of you. Bright Moon of that year didn't know how to express her feelings. It was a terrible feeling. She thought that she would be able to exchange a few blows with the military governor. In the end, she didn't even see how he defeated her, and she lost. Yes. Gohan nodded honestly. More accurately, it was 2.5 seconds. Bright moon of that year. This, dear viewers, I know that you didn't see what just happened, but it doesn't matter. We will replay the battle in slow motion. Everyone, please look at the big screen. The host wiped his sweat. This was definitely the most tiring day he had ever been in the hosting industry. Soon, the big screen began to replay the details of the match. We noticed that the screen was marked with 0.05. In other words, the battle was being played at 20 times the normal speed. This meant that the host believed that only by playing it at 20 times the normal speed would the audience understand what had happened. Release. Sunset Sword. After the match started, Bright Moon of that year's first action was to release her Sunset Sword. There was nothing to complain about, because every player who wasn't a sword master would use this action as their starting step. However, under 20 times the normal speed, Bright Moon of that year's action looked extremely laughable. Especially when Bright Moon of that year lifted her head, her large nostrils pointed at the camera for a full 3 to 4 seconds. The audience burst out in laughter. At the same time, when Bright Moon released her sword lady, the military governor also took action. In the video, he was walking at a strange pace, as though he was taking a stroll toward Bright Moon of that year. But this was played at 20 times the normal speed. Slowed down by 20 times, it looked like he was only slightly slower than a normal person walking. If he returned to his original speed, wouldn't Gohan's instantaneous speed be on the same level as a supersonic plane? That was why when the match started, Bright Moon of that year and Gohan of that year were still 100 meters apart. But when Bright Moon released her Sunset Sword, Gohan of that year was less than 10 meters away from Bright Moon of that year. At this time, 20 seconds had passed on the screen. In other words, in reality, only 1 second had passed. Sunset Sword, who had just been released, had a confused expression on her face. Although she had received the order to attack the military governor, she couldn't see Gohan's figure. She instinctively opened her eyes, trying to find Gohan's position. Sunset Sword's attention was focused on the distance, so she didn't notice that Gohan was only a few meters away from her. With the scene slowed down by 20 seconds, Gohan brushed past Sunset Sword and walked up to Bright Moon of that year, whose eyes were half closed. At that moment, the Sunset Sword suddenly turned her head. After all, she was a famed sword-level sword lady. After her initial confusion, she immediately reacted and found the Admiral's position. Then, she turned her head and swung her sword, wanting to attack Gohan. Under the scene slowed down by 20 times, everyone could see that in the last second, Gohan had leisurely dodged Sunset Sword's 2 slashes. At the same time, his heavenly sword had landed at least 15 slashes on Bright Moon of that year's protective shield. Moreover, every slash had landed on the same spot on Bright Moon of that year's protective shield. Even a drop of water could pierce a stone, let alone a famed sword. Although the game's combat system design was inevitably filled with the taste of a game's data, it still tried to mimic a real combat situation as much as possible. In reality, no matter what it was, if it received a large number of attacks at the same spot, it would become more vulnerable to damage. For example, if you slashed a rock 1,000 times, you wouldn't be able to break it. But if you slashed the same spot 100 times, the rock would shatter on the spot. This effect would repeat itself in the game. If a player attacked the same spot on Bright Moon's protective shield, the player would be judged to have dealt stacked damage. Once the stacked damage reached around 15 slashes, it would be a terrifying amount of damage. Even Bright Moon of that year's protective shield, which had tens of thousands of energy points, couldn't resist the stacked damage and was shattered by Gohan. The slow-motion video ended at this point. It was a total of 50 seconds. Divided by 20 times, it was exactly the 2.5 seconds that Gohan had mentioned. After watching the video, All the players were silent. Their faces were as still as dead water. The military governor, who had picked up a famed sword maiden, was already this terrifying? Was this still an opponent that a famed sword maiden could defeat? Even if a spirit sword maiden went up, they would probably be beaten to a pulp by the military governor. Posts of anguish began to appear on the forum. The owners of these posts, without exception, were players who had bought the challenge lottery. They sadly expressed that there was no need to watch the following matches. The military governor had already won, and their money had already gone down the drain, even if the final result hadn't come out yet. Of course, there were also players who optimistically expressed that this was only the power of a famed sword maiden. The military governor had already promised not to use a famed sword maiden in the following matches, so everyone still had a chance. At least the strength of the number 1 famed sword maiden was also very shocking. If the military governor only used a treasured sword maiden, he might not be able to defeat the number 1 famed sword maiden. Everything was still unknown. With these encouraging posts, the players who had bet on the military governor to defeat the number 1 famed sword maiden perked up and began to watch the following matches. Is this really your full strength? Why do I feel like you're still hiding something? Although the match had already ended, the moon of that year didn't leave the arena. Instead, she stood beside Gohan and said these words to him. The host was also very tactful and didn't interrupt the reminiscing between friends. He began to say some trivial words to buy some time. How did you know? Gohan looked at the moon of that year with some surprise. What's so strange about that? I've known you for so long, when have you ever shown your full strength? The moon of that year's question made Gohan speechless. He did indeed hide something. The simplest was the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Gohan didn't take out this sword technique at all. There was another thing that Gohan had also hidden. But other than that, Gohan could guarantee to the moon of that year that he had used all his strength. There are still some things that I can't take out now. If possible, I hope that I never have to take them out, Gohan said. Forget it. That's your problem. It has nothing to do with me. Bright moon of that year curled her lips. However, won't you feel lonely if you don't have someone who can share all of your secrets and truly understand you? I won't. Gohan shook his head. Loneliness is a luxury for me. I don't have time to be lonely. Pretentious. The moon of that year stomped hard on Gohan's foot. Then, she was silent for a long time before she said something that Gohan didn't know how to answer. I'm getting married. Gohan really didn't know how to answer. So, he didn't reply. He just listened to the moon of that year quietly. It's not playing house in the game. It's a marriage in real life. I'm not young anymore. I'm 28 years old now. I'm past the age where I can disregard everything for love. In the words of my family, it's time for me to have descendants for my family. The moon of that year was very calm when she said this. It was as if she wasn't talking about her own matters. I told you that I'm also a sword wielder in real life. Actually, I lied to you. I don't have the talent to be a sword wielder. So, I'm just a woman to continue the bloodline in my family. But fortunately, my partner is a little brat who has been following me around every day since I was a child. I didn't expect that after following me for 22 years and not daring to say a word, a few days ago, he actually went crazy and ran to my father to ask for my hand in marriage. My father was happy and agreed. I have to say, this little brat is quite brave. After being cooped up for 22 years, he actually had such a manly day. This kind of ending is much better than I imagined. He's not a bad person. He might not have a great future in the future, but he definitely won't be a nobody. Gohan said to the moon of that year. It was as if he was praising her fiancé. That's all? The moon of that year's expression suddenly dimmed. Don't you have any other thoughts? Gohan didn't say anything. The moon of that year gritted her teeth. As long as someone is willing to ask, I'll be willing to go to the ends of the earth, even if I have no parents. If I'm willing, there's no ends of the earth in this world. Guhan knew that he couldn't avoid the moon of that year. So, he could only answer this way. I understand now. The moon of that year suddenly smiled brightly. I feel much more comfortable now. Actually, he's not a bad person. He's a good kid. Our family likes him very much. Although his strength isn't much, I believe that he'll have a bright future. Goodbye. I wish you a lifetime of loneliness. With that, the moon of that year went offline and disappeared. Chapter 634. After Bright Moon left the stage, Guhan put away the King of Yuzgojin's sword and took out the heavenly sword again. Then, the host placed a new lottery box in front of Guhan. At that time, Guhan's bet had accumulated to 10,000 quark sword element oral solution. So, Guhan's opponent was an opponent between the top 8 and top 16 of the famed sword-level players. Guhan first pulled out a number. As soon as the host picked up the call, before he could finish his sentence, the person on the other end hung up. It was unclear whether it was because there was an emergency or because he already knew the host's intention. After that, the host called 6 more people. This time, 3 of the 6 people were not online. 2 of them said that they were in a dungeon and could not come out. The last person simply said that he was watching the competition. He did not think that he was a match for the military governor, so there was no need for him to compete with him. As a result, Guhan was placed in a very awkward position. There were only 8 players from the top 8 to the top 16. Right now, there was only one player who had not made a call. If this player also rejected the military governor's challenge, then military governor would be in a situation that had never happened before in the history of the 8 cities sword tournament. He could not find a player who could be a match for a famed sword-level sword wielder. As there was no precedent, the 4 special grade planners began to have a heated discussion again. This time, the topic of discussion was how the officials should deal with the situation if the last player also rejected the challenge and they could not find a match for the military governor. Should they judge the military governor as the winner or should they contact him from the top 4 to the top 8? All in all, this was a situation that the 4 special grade planners felt very helpless. What was going on today? All kinds of troubles were coming one after another. Fortunately, when the 8th player's call was connected, the person on the other end of the call did not say that he was not available or reject the call. Instead, he made a request that the officials once again did not know how to deal with. The player told the host that he did not want the battle to be carried out in a duel. Instead, he wanted to carry out the battle in a clean-up way. This caused the officials to fall into a passive position once again. Generally speaking, the competition was conducted through a duel method. However, this wasn't fixed. In the semifinals, there was a certain chance of a cleanup battle. The so-called cleanup battle was a battle in which players from both sides would not engage in direct combat. Instead, both sides would be thrown into the endless Yuan Ko army, and the time limit would be 20 minutes. The player who killed the most Yuan Ko within 20 minutes would be the victor of the match. It could be seen from the format of the competition that this mode was mostly for entertainment purposes. It was just like the infinite firepower mode of LOL, which was usually not part of the official competition. Therefore, in the Sword Among 8 Cities, this mode would only appear randomly in the semifinals. If any player from both sides disagreed with this mode, the battle would still be carried out through the duel mode. As for the finals and the Challenger League, it would be the standard battle style for the final battle. Clean-up battles would not appear. However, now that the last player suggested using a clean-up battle to determine the winner, the game developers were once again placed in a difficult position. If they agreed, then the rules of the competition would be trampled once again. If they disagreed, then they would be in a situation where they had no opponent to send. Alright, let's start the match. Just as the competition entered a dilemma, Gohan took the initiative to speak to the other person on the communicator. Alright, since the military governor had taken the initiative to agree, the officials would simply go with the flow and agree to this request. After a minute, the teleportation door on the arena opened, and the second opponent of the military governor in the Challenger League finally revealed his identity. It was a seemingly decent-looking man with a faint smile on his face. This is where fighting the tiger, an expert ranked 10th on the famous sword leaderboard. Immediately, some players recognized the identity of this famous sword-level swordsman. This person was extremely famous among the famous sword-level players. The famous sword in his hand, the fiery sword, was the flame that left a deep impression in many people's memories. It's him. No wonder he wants to use a clean-up battle to determine the winner. No wonder. If it's a clean-up battle, not only would this where fighting the tiger have the power to fight, but he might even be able to defeat the military governor. A player said excitedly. His friend sitting next to him immediately asked curiously, "What do you mean? Why don't I understand?" This where fighting the tiger. Alright, it's hard to explain in a short time. You'll understand when you see it. Gentlemen, the clean-up battle mode is about to begin. Please take turns to choose the main settings for the clean-up battle, the host said to the military governor, and where fighting the tiger at the same time. Choosing settings was a special opening step of the clean-up battle. As there were many factors that determined the winner of the clean-up battle, the game developers listed out the 4 most important factors and allowed both players to choose 2 of them in order to ensure fairness. Then, let's start with the environment selection. So, which of you 2 should choose first? Less than a second after the host finished his question, where fighting the tiger rushed to say, "Let Mr. Military Governor choose first. I've already shamelessly asked to enter the clean-up battle. He should be the one to choose first." In response, Gohan nodded indifferently and took the lead to choose first. There were not many options given to Gohan, only 8. They were ocean, desert, green land, city, ruins, jungle, mountain, sky. Gohan did not think too much and immediately chose the green land option. This was the favorite place of powerful players because the green land had a wide field of vision and there were no obstructions. They could kill their opponents without any obstacles. On the contrary, weaker players preferred environments like city, ruins, or jungle. This was because it was good for hiding and could launch sneak attacks when least expected. After Gohan made his choice, it was time to choose where fighting the tiger. Where fighting the tiger faced the choice of weather. There were 8 options: sunny, cloudy, heavy rain, heavy snow, scorching sun, extreme cold, moonlit night, and dark night. After thinking about where to fight the tiger for a while, he finally chose the scorching sun weather. The scorching sun weather sounded similar to a sunny day, but it was not. The temperature on a sunny day was around 25 degrees, which was the most suitable temperature for battle. However, under the scorching sun, the temperature was around 70 degrees. Ordinary people would instantly dehydrate and be burnt to a crisp under such a temperature. Even a swordsman would feel uncomfortable in such a situation, and their combat power would naturally decrease a lot. The choice was once again in Gohan's hands. This time, Gohan chose the level and density to challenge Yuan Ko. There were 8 options: Ghost level low, Ghost level high, Soul level low, Soul level high, Dragon level low, Dragon level low, Dragon level high, Dragon level low, Dragon level high. Gohan directly chose the Dragon level high option. This meant that Gohan's opponent would be a high-density dragon level, Yuan Ko. Finally, it was time to choose where to fight the tiger. The last main setting was Yuan Ko. The system gave 8 different dragon level Yuan Ko. This time, Gohan chose the Snow Lady, high dragon level Yuan Ko without hesitation. 2 players, the battle space is being generated. You have 1 minute to prepare. After 1 minute, you will enter the battle space. The player with the highest killing speed within 20 minutes will be the winner. the host said excitedly. According to the usual practice, we have to look at the various reactions of the players on the forum. I'm so excited. The military governor is invincible in one-on-one battles. I wonder how his skills are. This was the comment of the ordinary players. The military governor has a high chance of winning. Snow Lady is born with thin skin. Her defense is even weaker than the tiger level, Yuan Ko, sometimes. The military governor can kill his opponents one by one in a second. This was the comment of a blindly optimistic player. No, the military governor is in danger this time. The military governor has been tricked this time. This was the comment of a high-end player. He continued, one snow lady is trash, but a group of snow ladies is a god. The snow lady's attack comes with a deceleration and freezing effect. Even if the military governor's speed is faster than a jet plane, he will still be restricted by the disgusting freezing effect. Think about it. Thousands of snow ladies attacking the military governor at the same time. Even if the probability of triggering is only 1%, the military governor will still be frozen on the spot. He might not even be able to kill a single snow lady. Isn't it the same no matter where we fight the tiger? Won't he be frozen as well? A puzzled player asked. That's the key to tricking the military governor. This high-end player replied bitterly. The fiery sword comes with a super buff of freeze immunity. Indeed, the fiery sword came with a freeze immunity buff. One could tell from its name that the fiery sword was a sword lady with the fire attribute. Among the sword ladies of the famed sword rank, the number of sword ladies with the fire attribute was the highest. This was because the fire element was usually the main attack element. At the famed sword level, attack was more important and practical than any other level. There was a saying among the famed sword level swordsmen, attack is the king. Among all the sword ladies of the famed sword rank, the fiery sword was second only to the phoenix fire sword. It was ranked 12th in the famed sword record. The fiery sword's body was burning with the legendary fiery fire. To put it simply, fiery fire was the flame of the sun. It was the flame at the outermost layer of the sun. It was the flame that moved away from the sun, so it was called fiery fire. In contrast, the flame at the center of the sun was the legendary true Samadhi fire. Although leaf fire was one of the immortal fires, it was actually not of a high grade. It was only slightly stronger than ordinary fire. If it was really compared to the true Samadhi fire, it would be like the difference between a second kick and an atomic bomb. However, fiery fire was still a flame that came from the sun. Therefore, fiery fire had a special characteristic that only the sun had. It was hot, firm, and immune to ice. Chapter 635. It was just like what the expert player had said. With the flame protection, who fights tiger was completely unafraid of the snow lady's freezing abilities. That was because the skill description of the flame sword was as such: passive skill, ice immunity, immune to the freezing effects of Yuan Ko below the dragon level, as well as the speed reduction effects caused by the cold. In normal battles, this passive skill was actually quite useless. This was because this passive skill was only useful against the cold attribute of Yuan Ko. However, regardless of whether it was in the game or in real life, the probability of encountering a cold attribute Yuan Ko was less than 2%. If the opponent Yuan Ko did not have the ability to freeze you, then this passive skill was as good as useless. However, when entering the combat space that was made up of snow ladies, this passive skill became a super godly skill. There were so many snow maidens in the combat space that they stretched as far as the eye could see. There were at least 2,000 snow maidens in the combat space, and among these snow maidens, there were only about 150 snow maidens who could attack the combat space. Who fights tiger's expression did not change when faced with 150 snowballs being hurled at him at the same time. He allowed the snowballs to hit his personal shield. Other than dealing a pitiful amount of damage, the originally crucial freezing effect was completely nullified. The reason why the Snow Ladies were so strong was because of the powerful freezing effects of their skills. In reality, the attack power of the snowballs was not high. Even when they hit Who Fights Tiger's personal shield, they did not deal much damage. Especially when Who Fights Tiger released the flame sword. The damage from the snowballs disappeared without a trace. A bright red halo appeared on the body of the flame sword. All the snowballs that entered the halo would quickly melt. Before they could reach the flame sword, they would immediately turn into puddles of water. Now, the Snow Ladies could not even deal damage to him. What kind of skill is this? It's so overpowered. One of the spectators could not help but exclaim. This skill could actually melt the attacks of 150 Snow Ladies. What a terrifying ability! Overpowered my ass. I can only say that Who Fights Tiger really knows how to play tricks. A player said in disgust, "This circle of light is actually the advanced skill of the fiery sword, Fiery Circle." The Fire Circle is able to create a circle of light with the user as the center. Within the circle of light, all opponents will suffer 3 points of fire damage per second. Yuan Ko, who has the cold attribute, will suffer 8 points of damage per second. Even cold attribute attacks are no exception. These snowballs naturally belonged to the cold attribute attack, so they were naturally melted by the ring of fire. Trap. It's all a trick. After hearing the explanation, the player who asked the question couldn't help but sigh. If everyone thought that Whack the Tiger's strategy was over here, they would be sorely mistaken. Because Whack the Tiger had prepared a deeper strategy for the military governor to enjoy. Sword Maiden Li Huijian, who had gone to fight the tiger, suddenly stood motionless in her original spot. She raised her hands high and silently chanted, as if she was preparing for a big move. About 20 seconds later, Lin Sanjiu's eyes lit up. A bright red fireball gradually appeared in Li Huijian's raised hand. It became brighter and larger until the fireball reached a diameter of about a meter. Li Huijian's eyes suddenly opened. The fireball was like a missile. The moment Li Huijian opened her eyes, the fireball was launched into the sky. The fireball rushed directly toward the position of the sun in the sky and quickly disappeared without a trace. Just when the puzzled people thought that this big move was useless, something terrible happened. The sun, which was originally about 70 degrees Celsius, suddenly became more than 10 times more intense. After the sun's flames, which were enough to turn a small suckling pig into a roasted suckling pig in a few seconds, shone on the ground, the snow women who were continuously throwing snowballs at Whack the Tiger instantly began to melt. It wasn't until 20 seconds later that the scorching sun's flames returned to normal. However, the snow women who were exposed to the sun's flames had turned into a pool of snow water. Kill count: 125. Almost in an instant, Whack the Tiger's kill count went from 0 to 125. Only a minute and a half had passed since he entered the battle space. What kind of stupid skill is this? The player who had just managed to shut his mouth with much difficulty opened it wide once more. One skill actually killed 125 Dragon-class Yuan Ko of the same level. Why did this guy look more like a military governor than a military governor? Shut your mouth. This is Li Huijian's big move. World Annihilating Flaming Sun. The expert player continued to act as an explanation. The effect of World Annihilating Flaming Sun is to increase the power of the sun's rays, turning the originally warm sunlight into a flame that can roast people to death. Depending on the channeling time, World Annihilating Flaming Sun can increase the temperature of the sunlight within a certain range by 2 to 30 times. This isn't considered scary in a normal environment of about 30 degrees Celsius. Even if the channeling time reaches its upper limit, which is to raise the temperature to 900 degrees Celsius, a normal Dragon-class Yuan Ko would be able to endure it for a while. At most, He would lose 20% or 30% of his HP. However, the temperature in the combat space is as high as 70 degrees Celsius. 30 times is 2,100 degrees Celsius, and the ones being roasted are the snow ladies, who are naturally afraid of fire. It's only natural for these snow ladies to be killed instantly. At this point, the expert player sighed deeply. He sprawled weakly on his seat and wailed, "Where to fight the tiger? This scoundrel is too cunning. The entire process is a trap. Choosing a clean-up battle is a trap. Letting the military governor choose the settings first is also a trap. Choosing the scorching hot weather is even more of a trap. Finally, turning the opponent into a snow lady who is completely restrained by him is even more of a trap. This where to fight the tiger has already schemed against the military governor. Under the circumstances where the military governor doesn't use the famed sword-level sword mistress, how could he possibly kill 125 snow ladies in an instant? It's over, it's all over. The 100,000 yuan that I bet on the military governor to defeat the number 1 famed sword-level sword mistress is all gone. Gone. That's right. Where to fight the tiger had indeed schemed against Gohan. He knew that he was no match for Gohan one-on-one, so he suggested a clean-up battle based on the number of kills. He also knew that the person who chose later would be able to choose the weather and Yuan Ko, so he pretended to be a good person and gave the priority to Gohan. He chose the scorching hot sun and the snow lady settings himself. One was able to increase the damage of his ultimate skill to the maximum, and the other was Yuan Ko, who was suppressed to the extreme by the leaf fire. If any of these calculations were missing, Nowhere to Fight the Tiger would not be able to kill the dragon-level Yuan Ko with a single ultimate skill, and it would be even more impossible for him to defeat the military governor. Seeing the speed and meticulous calculations of Where to Fight the Tiger, everyone who originally thought that the military governor would definitely win completely tilted towards Where to Fight the Tiger. This was especially so when the Leaf Fire Sword's ultimate skill, World-Extinguishing Flaming Sun, entered its cooldown period. Where to Fight the Tiger charged into the areas that were not covered by the ultimate skill with his Leaf Fire Sword and lured all the snow ladies there together. 3 minutes later, the Leaf Fire Sword's skill cooldown was over, and he unleashed another world-extinguishing flaming sun. Where to Fight the Tiger's kill count actually increased from 125 to 420. Where to Fight the Tiger had lured 295 snow ladies into the range of his ultimate skill. Where to Fight the Tiger's next battle was rather boring. In fact, it was just a repetition of the previous steps, which was to continuously lure more snow ladies, and then use an ultimate skill to clear the area. It was convenient, simple, and quick, as if there was no danger at all. The Leaf Fire Sword's ultimate skill had a cooldown period of 3 minutes. In theory, he should be able to use his ultimate skill 7 times in 20 minutes. However, when the Leaf Fire Sword was about to use his ultimate skill for the 5th time to clear the area, something unexpected happened. Not only did the snow ladies have a freezing effect on their attacks, they also had the ability to summon a blizzard. This was part of Where to Fight the Tiger's plan. According to Where to Fight the Tiger's understanding of the snow ladies would only be agitated when their bodies were attacked, and then the snow ladies would unleash their ultimate skill, Blizzard. As long as Where to Fight the Tiger maintained his distance from the snow ladies and did not touch their bodies, the snow ladies would not unleash their blizzard. However, on his 6th attempt, Where to Fight the Tiger made a mistake. When he fired, the tiger was moving. A brand new snow lady just so happened to respawn beside him. This snow lady's body just so happened to collide with Where to Fight the Tiger's body. The snow lady immediately let out a horrifying wail. Her shrill cry instantly caused a phenomenon in the sky. The sky that was originally bright and sunny was instantly covered by dark clouds. The temperature began to drop rapidly, and large amounts of snowflakes began to fall. It's over. Where to Fight the Tiger knew that his plan had failed when he saw this scene. The sky was blocked and the temperature plummeted. Even if Li Hui used his ultimate skill now, he would not be able to instantly kill these snow ladies. Something even more terrifying happened. This snow maiden's cries of anguish became a catalyst. The other snow maidens around her heard her cries of anguish, and they all stood rooted to the spot as they began to howl in anguish. For the sake of convenience, God-slaying Tiger had attracted the attention of a few hundred snow maidens at the same time. The snow maidens that were supposed to become his kill tally had now become his death talismans. Even an idiot knew what would happen when hundreds of snow ladies unleashed blizzard at the same time. Although Fight the Tiger would not be frozen into a popsicle due to the snow lady's immunity, the damage of hundreds of blizzard skills was enough to kill Where to Fight the Tiger. In less than 5 seconds, Where to Fight the Tiger, who was in high spirits a moment ago, was frozen to death and kicked out of the combat space. Even though he was disappointed that he wasn't able to end the 20-minute battle perfectly, he wasn't flustered. Even though there were only 5 waves of snow maidens, he still managed to slay 1254 snow maidens. This was an astronomical number, and he didn't believe that the military governor would be able to surpass him. Where to Hit the Tiger was ready to accept the cheers of the audience, but he found that none of the audience was paying attention to him. All of their attention was focused on the big screen. With just a glance, he was instantly dumbfounded. Chapter 636. Am I seeing a ghost? Where to Hit the Tiger rubbed his eyes in disbelief. The huge screen was displaying the military governor's battle on the other battlefield. He didn't care how the military governor was fighting or where he was fighting the tiger. All he cared about was the continuously jumping kill count under the military governor's screen. The kill count of 1201 pierced deeply into Where to Hit the Tiger's eyes, sending chills down his spine. He was dumbstruck. Even though his score was 1254, which seemed to be ahead of the military governor, this snow lady only had 53 kills. However, this snow maiden only had 53 kills, and the admiral still had 4 minutes left. In the previous 16 minutes, the admiral had killed 75 snow maidens per minute. No matter how he calculated the remaining 4 minutes, the admiral could easily make up for the remaining 53 snow maidens. Impossible, I'm the fastest. How can he be faster than me? He must have used a famed sword maiden. Where to Hit the Tiger was indignant. He suddenly raised his head and stared at the screen. This time, he didn't care about the military governor's kill count anymore. He only cared about how the military governor was killing these snow ladies. However, the situation on the screen shocked him once again. He thought that the military governor should be fighting a tough battle with the snow ladies, but to Where to Hit the Tiger's surprise, the military governor had been turned into an ice sculpture, frozen in the snow. Actually, the military governor being turned into an ice sculpture was the most normal situation. The snow ladies' normal attacks had a 10% chance of triggering the freezing effect. In theory, as long as 10 snow ladies attacked the military governor at the same time, the military governor would be frozen. Of course, considering the probability of triggering the freezing effect, it was possible that 30 snowballs wouldn't be able to freeze him. However, when more than 100 snow ladies attacked him at the same time, the probability of this happening was close to 0. This was also the reason why He Who Fights the Tiger was so confident in coming up with this plan to deal with the military governor. It was also why He Who Fights the Tiger had dug a huge trap for the military governor. How could the military governor have the confidence to fight a tiger? Unless the military governor had a sword maiden or an item that was immune to freezing effects like he did, the snow ladies would definitely be a threat to him. Not to mention surpassing him, it would be a huge problem if he could even kill 1 or 2 snow ladies. In the end, the military governor's score had actually reached 1,204. As such, no slaying tiger assumed that the military governor was like him, possessing a skill or item that was immune to the frost attribute. That was how he managed to reach 1,204 kills. However, he didn't expect the military governor to be frozen. He had no way to resist the Snow Lady's ice attribute. If the military governor couldn't resist the Snow Lady's ice attribute, how did he kill 1,204 of them? Where should he go to fight the tiger? His heart was full of doubts. Could it be that the military governor is only occasionally frozen, and he has a way to escape when the freeze effect ends? Where to fight the tiger guessed. The freeze effect lasted for 5 seconds, and the freeze effect would end within 5 seconds. Before the freeze effect took effect again, the military governor should have 1 or 2 seconds to react. Could it be that he used these 2 seconds to kill the Snow Ladies? Where to fight the tiger focused all of his attention on the military governor on the screen. The Snow Lady's attacks were continuous. Even though Gohan was frozen, the follow-up attacks still landed on the military governor's body. Fortunately, the freeze effect on the military governor helped the military governor resist the snowball's attack. A player in the freeze effect was immune to all attacks, which was equivalent to an invincible state. This was also the reason why the military governor could be attacked by the Snow Ladies for 16 minutes. Without the freeze invincibility effect, the military governor would have been tortured to death by the Snow Ladies' attack. Fortunately, the freeze effect wouldn't stack. After the military governor was frozen, he wouldn't be frozen by the remaining attacks. This way, after the 5 seconds of freeze, the military governor would have a little time to defrost. Although he might be frozen again by the next dozen or so snowballs, the 1 or 2 seconds in between were enough for an expert to do something. As expected, after 4 seconds, the ice on the military governor's body shattered. It's coming! Where to fight the tiger's eyes widened like lanterns. He stared at the military governor, trying to figure out what the military governor was going to do in the 2 seconds of freedom. Is he going to use his sword skills to kill all the Snow Ladies around him? Or is he going to use some skill or item to increase his freeze resistance? Where to fight the tiger guessed crazily. The military governor only had 1 or 2 seconds, otherwise, he wouldn't have the chance. Less than a second later, where to fight the tiger's face stiffened. In that 1 second, the military governor seemed to have fallen asleep. He didn't react at all. He had clearly regained his hard-earned freedom, but the admiral, who should have seized the opportunity to act urgently, closed his eyes like a wooden statue and allowed the snowballs to continuously attack him until they triggered the freezing effect again, freezing the admiral again. How is this possible? Where to fight the tiger couldn't figure it out. If it was an ordinary player, the military governor's reaction would be extremely normal. That was because ordinary players wouldn't be able to react within 1 second before they were frozen again. However, for an expert, there were many things they could do within 1 second. Take where to fight the tiger as an example. In 1 second, he could use at least 2 skills or items, give his sword lady a series of commands, or escape 10 meters away. Where to fight the tiger believed that he wasn't on the same level as the military governor. There was no reason why the military governor couldn't do what he could. The military governor would only do better than him. The reason why he didn't stay where he was as if he had accepted his fate. No, there must be something wrong here. If the military governor didn't do anything, then where did the 1,204 kills come from? Where to fight the tiger instinctively felt that something was wrong. However, the strange thing was that the military governor didn't move at all. It was as if he had no intention of moving at all. It was like this when there were 16 minutes left, and it was the same when there were 17 minutes left. Until the last minute, the admiral still didn't move, and his kill count remained at 1204 without any change. Did I really win? Although he was still filled with doubts, where to fight the tiger began to feel excited. He thought that his defeat was already set in stone. Suddenly, he saw the goddess of victory recruiting him again. Although he was still confused, Where to Fight the Tiger began to clench his fists and prepare to celebrate. He defeated the insufferably arrogant military governor with his own hands. He won the battle that the other 7 top 16 contestants used all sorts of lame excuses to avoid. How awesome was this? Where to Fight the Tiger's reputation would be at least 100 times better than it was now. His fans would also increase by at least 100 times. Where to Fight the Tiger knew that this kind of victory was a little despicable. It suppressed the military governor's abilities to the lowest and maximized his own advantages. However, he was also acting within the rules. This was called strategy, understand? Didn't the military governor himself keep the matter of the Yu Wangjian a secret until now? If it wasn't for the strong public anger, why would the military governor decide not to use a famous sword-level sword Maiden in the challenge between the famous sword group and the spiritual sword group? The reward was secondary. Reputation was the most important. Where to Fight the Tiger leisurely thought about it. It was already 1930. There were still 30 seconds left before the military governor's match would end. Even if the military governor started fighting, he wouldn't be able to kill 50 snow maidens in 30 seconds. Victory was already in his hands. Thinking of this, Where to Fight the Tiger was extremely excited. He suddenly took off his shirt and did a beautiful somersault in the air to celebrate his victory. One somersault wasn't enough. He decided to celebrate with 100 somersaults. This could also be an embellishment to his victory news. He even thought of the title for the news report, Military Governor Invincible, Famous Sword-Level Sword Wielder. Where to Fight the Tiger teaches the military governor how to be a man. 100 somersaults to celebrate an unbelievable victory. Therefore, he kept doing somersaults around the arena. He didn't know how many somersaults he had done. Suddenly, he, who had been glancing at the screen from the corner of his eyes, realized that the military governor had moved. Pah! Where to Fight the Tiger's somersault failed, and he fell heavily to the ground. However, he didn't care about this little bit of pain. All his attention was on the military governor on the screen. When there were only 20 seconds left, the admiral, who had remained motionless during the freezing interval, was suddenly moved. The gourd that he had been holding in his hand was instantly raised in front of him, and the contents of the gourd were drained in one gulp. In the next moment, the military governor's body emitted a bright red glow. The attacking snowballs were melted by the red glow. When the glow dissipated, the sound of a golden armor riding on a divine horse claw let out a deafening neigh. He looked as mighty as a divine general. That's the heavenly sword's ultimate skill. Where to Fight the Tiger took a step back in fear when he saw the military governor on the screen. But, so what if he used the ultimate skill? It's not like he's immune to the freezing effect. Plus, it can only last for 10 seconds. After the initial shock, Where to Fight the Tiger quickly calmed down and mumbled to himself. Although the heavenly sword had not appeared in the world for a long time, as the #1 sword maiden among the treasured swords, her ability was naturally something that every player paid attention to. Where to Fight the Tiger was no exception. After learning that he was going to fight the military governor, he purposely glanced at the heavenly sword's information and understood the effect of the heavenly sword's ultimate skill. He was certain that the heavenly sword's ultimate skill could not escape the Snow Lady's freezing effect. Could the military governor really turn the tables with this ultimate skill? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.